Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto became a gold dragon and fell in love with the Dragon Queen, Naruto x Irene fairy tale. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Golden Transformation. The ancient scroll crackled beneath Naruto's fingertips, its weathered parchment threatening to disintegrate at the slightest provocation. Moonlight spilled through the cracked ceiling of the abandoned Uzushio temple, illuminating dust motes that danced around him like tiny fireflies. 3 days of continuous travel had led him here, guided by cryptic messages Fr. His clones scattered across the continent. This has to be it, he muttered, azure eyes narrowing as they traced the faded characters. The Scroll of Draconic Ascension. 6 months had passed CNCE, the end of the Fourth Great Ninja War. 6 months of rebuilding, of diplomatic missions, of being hailed as the hero who had saved the world. Yet peace remained fragile, with whispers of Otsutsuki remnants gathering in the shadows. Kakashi, now Hokage, had dispatched him to investigate rumors of an ancient weapon being sought by these extraterrestrial threats. What he'd found instead was this. A forbidden jutsu created during the Sage of Six Paths era, rumored to transform worthy users into dragons of immense power. According to legend, the technique had been sealed away after its creator transformed permanently, disappearing from the ninja world entirely. A twig snapped outside the temple ruins. Naruto didn't flinch, having sensed the chakra signatures moments earlier. "You can stop hiding," he called out, carefully rolling the scroll closed. "I counted 6 of you entering the perimeter 3 minutes ago." Pale figures materialized from the shadows, white-skinned, horn-bare. Humanoids with the distinctive Byakugan-like eyes of the Otsutsuki clan. Their leader stepped forward, silver hair gleaming in the moonlight, a sardonic smile twisting his aristocratic features. "Uzumaki Naruto," he intoned, voice resonating with unnatural harmonics. "How convenient. We had planned to extract the scroll and then hunt you down separately, but here you are, delivering both prizes directly into our hands." Naruto stood unhurriedly, tucking the scroll into his weapon's pouch. "And you would be Kinshiki Otsutsuki, herald of Lord Momoshiki." The figure's smile widened. "The scroll, if you please. My master requires its power." "Funny thing about requirements," Naruto replied, rolling his shoulders casually. "I've found they're usually just strongly worded suggestions." 2 shadow clones silently formed behind him, one slipping away unnoticed as Kinshiki's attention fixed on Naruto. "You misunderstand the situation," Kinshiki said. "We are not here to negotiate." The air crackled as the Otsutsuki agents activated strange, bone-like weapons that hummed with otherworldly energy. Naruto didn't reach for a kunai, didn't form a Rasengan. Instead, he simply smiled. "Neither am I." The first attack came from his left, a blur of white that would have decapitated a lesser shinobi. Naruto swayed backward, the bone blade missing his throat by millimeters. His counterattack was immediate and devastating, a palm strike delivered with such precision that his attacker's sternum shattered inward, puncturing vital organs. The Otsutsuki hadn't expected taijutsu of that caliber from the supposedly ninjutsu-dependent Jinchuriki. 1. Naruto counted quietly. The remaining 5 attacked simultaneously, their movements synchronized with inhuman precision. Naruto's form blurred as he activated Six Paths Sage mode, golden chakra illuminating the temple ruins. What followed wasn't a battle so much as a brutal demonstration of why challenging the hero of Konoha was considered suicidal in most circles. A Rasenshuriken carved through 2 attackers, their regenerative abilities failing against the cellular-level destruction of his technique. 3. He murmured, already pivoting to face the next threat. The 4th attacker fared no better, impaled on a truth-seeking orb that Naruto molded into a spear with a mere thought. The 5th managed to land a lancing blow that opened a shallow cut along Naruto's forearm before a clone appeared behind him, driving a Rasengan through his spine. 5. Only Kinshiki remained, his expression no longer condescending but calculating. Impressive, but ultimately futile. "The power of that scroll belongs to the Otsutsuki. It is our birthright. You know," Naruto said conversationally, wiping blood from his kunai. "I've never understood that argument. If it was truly yours, wouldn't you already have it? Kinshiki's attack was blindingly fast, forcing Naruto to defend rather than attack. The Otsutsuki's fighting style was ancient and unfamiliar, each movement flowing into the next with lethal precision. For several minutes, they exchanged blows that would have leveled mountains had they connected properly. Lord Momoshiki foresaw this confrontation. Kinshiki grunted as they locked weapons. He knows what you will choose. Really? Because I'm still deciding. Their deadly dance continued across the temple grounds, destroying ancient pillars and shattering stone floors laid by long-forgotten Uzumaki craftsmen. Neither combatant gained a decisive advantage, though Naruto appeared to be tiring first. It was exactly what he wanted Kinshiki to believe. When Naruto stumbled on a broken flagstone, Kinshiki pressed forward eagerly, bone weapon aimed at the Jinchuriki's heart. His thrust no resistance as Naruto's form dissipated in a puff of smoke. A shadow clone. When did? Kinshiki's question died as Naruto erupted from the ground beneath him, fist connecting with devastating force. The Otsutsuki flew backward, crashing through the temple's remaining wall and tumbling across the courtyard. Before he could recover, Naruto was on him, a Rasengan compressed to deadly density spinning in his palm. 6. He said softly, driving the technique into Kinshiki's chest. The Otsutsuki convulsed, white blood spilling from his lips. You don't understand, he gasped. The transformation will not work as you expect. It will. His warning ended abruptly as his body disintegrated, molecular bonds unable to withstand the Rasengan's grinding power. Naruto stood slowly, brushing dust from his black and orange jacket. Message received from clone. Kurama's voice rumbled within his mind. More Otsutsuki approaching from the northeast. At least 20, including a Chakra S. Ignature that makes these 6 look like academy students. Naruto nodded, eyes narrowing. Momoshiki, I'm guessing. Time to location. 15 minutes, maybe less. He retrieved the scroll from his pouch. Golden chakra illuminating the ancient text. Not enough time to escape with the scroll. If they're this determined to get it, you're not seriously considering using it. Kurama growled. Unknown forbidden techniques are literally the first thing they warn you against at the academy. Naruto's lips quirked upward. When have I ever been one for following the rules? This is different. That scroll's chakra feels wrong. Not evil, exactly, but not of this world either. Which is precisely why we can't let the Otsutsuki have it. Naruto spread the scroll wider, scanning the instructions rapidly. Besides, who better to attempt it than someone with your chakra reserves and my healing ability? Kurama rumbled his displeasure but offered no further argument. They both knew there was little choice. If Momoshiki obtained whatever power this scroll contained, the fragile piece they'd sacrificed so much to achieve would shatter. The jutsu itself was shockingly complex, requiring 64 simultaneous hand seals performed in a specific sequence while channeling chakra through precise meridian points. For almost any other shinobi, it would have been impossible. For Naruto, who could create thousands of shadow clones and had mastered Sage Mode's nature energy manipulation, it was merely extremely difficult. Here goes everything, he muttered, fingers blurring through the first sequence. The temple ruins began to hum with resonant energy as Naruto worked through the jutsu. Dust swirled around him, ancient characters peeling off the scroll to orbit his body like planetary rings. His skin tingled, then burned, chakra pathways widening to accommodate something vast and primal surging through his system. Naruto, Kurama warned, something's wrong. This chakra, it's not transforming you. It's relocating you. What? Naruto gasped, but it was too late to stop. The jutsu had reached critical mass, golden light pouring from his eyes and mouth as the transformation began in earnest. Pain erupted along his spine, bones cracking and reforming into something larger, more sinuous. His skin hardened, keratin scales erupting in symmetrical patterns across his body. Muscle tissue tore and regenerated at frightening speed, density increasing tenfold. Most disturbing was the sensation of his internal organs shifting, rearranging to accommodate his new physiology. Through it all, Naruto remained conscious, Kurama's chakra working desperately to prevent the transformation from killing him outright. His perspective shifted as he grew larger, the temple ruins suddenly seeming like a dollhouse beneath him. Golden scales covered his body, reflecting the moonlight with metallic brilliance. Wings unfurled from his back, spanning wider than the temple itself. But the physical transformation was secondary to what happened next. The space around him began to warp, reality itself bending as though viewed through heat ripples above summer pavement. The stars overhead blurred, smearing across his vision like wet paint. It's a dimensional jutsu, Kurama roared, his voice distorting as space-time folded around them. Not just transformation, transportation. Naruto tried to respond, but his newly formed dragon maw couldn't articulate human speech. Instead, a thunderous roar echoed across the ruins, shattering the few remaining windows and collapsing weakened walls. The last thing he saw before reality tore completely was a group of white-clad figures cresting the hill, Momoshiki and his followers, arriving just in time to witness their prize slipping beyond reach. Their silent fury was almost worth the dimensional agony that followed. Then Naruto was falling, tumbling through void space where direction had no meaning and time stretched like taffy. His consciousness flickered, dragon senses overwhelmed by input no human mind was designed to process. If not for Kurama anchoring his psyche, his personality might have fragmented entirely. After an eternity that might have been seconds, reality reasserted itself. Naruto crashed through unfamiliar skies, golden wings instinctively spreading to slow his descent. Below stretched mountains he didn't recognize. Forests of trees unlike any in the 5 great nations, and a quality of air that tasted fundamentally different, richer somehow, saturated with energy that wasn't chakra but resonated with it nonetheless. Where are we? He managed to think at Kurama, struggling to control his massive new body. Not where, the fox corrected grimly. When and what dimension would be better questions. Unable to maintain flight with untrained wings, Naruto plummeted toward a mountain lake, his dragon form carving through the water like a golden torpedo. The impact should have killed him. But his new physiology absorbed the blow, dense muscle and reinforced bone barely registering what would have liquefied a human body. Underwater, disoriented and panicking, Naruto thrashed WILDLY before dragon instincts asserted themselves. His lungs, larger and more efficient than any human's, could extract oxygen directly from water. Powerful limbs propelled him upward until his head broke the surface, serpentine neck arching as he gasped for air out of habit rather than necessity. On the lakeshore stood a solitary figure, a woman with long scarlet hair that cascaded down her back like blood spilled across snow. Her attire was unfamiliar, an elaborate dress that seemed both archaic and regal, adorned with symbols Naruto didn't recognize. Most striking were her eyes, sharp, calculating, and ancient beyond their apparent age. She studied him with narrowed gaze, one hand resting on an ornate staff topped with a crystalline lacrima. When she spoke, her voice carried across the water with unnatural clarity. Interesting, she said, the word weighted with centuries of experience. A golden dragon of unfamiliar lineage, appearing from nowhere, bearing chakra rather than ethernano. Her lips curved slightly. You're a long way from home, aren't you, traveler? Naruto tried to respond, forgetting again that his dragon form couldn't articulate human speech. What emerged, instead, was a rumbling growl that sent ripples across the lake's surface. The woman didn't flinch. If anything, her smile deepened. Cannot speak yet, newly transformed, then. She tapped her staff against the rocky shore. I am Irene Belsarion, the Dragon Queen. And you are either the most fortunate creature to cross my path in centuries, or the most doomed. Irene Belsarion had lived over 400 years. Most of them trapped in dragon form. She had only recently regained her human appearance through methods she preferred not to dwell upon. The experience had left her with little patience for mysteries. Yet here was perhaps the greatest enigma she'd encountered in decades, swimming awkwardly toward her shore. A golden dragon, radiating power unlike any she'd encountered, had literally torn through reality before her eyes. The dimensional distortion had drawn her to this remote lake in northern Fury, far from human settlements. What she'd expected to find was a magical anomaly. Perhaps a weakening in the barriers between worlds that occasionally occurred in regions of concentrated magical power. What she found instead was him, magnificently golden, clearly powerful. And equally clearly having no idea how to control his form. Stop thrashing, she commanded as the dragon reached shallower water. You'll only exhaust yourself further. Focus on your center of gravity. A dragon's body moves like water, not like a human's collection of disparate limbs. The dragon stilled, great head turning to regard her with startlingly blue eyes. Intelligence shone within them, not the instinctual cunning of a beast, but the sharp awareness of a sentient mind trapped in unfamiliar form. Interesting indeed. You understand me, Irene observed. Good. That simplifies matters. Can you manage to reach shore without destroying half the landscape? I have questions that would be best addressed without an audience, and your dramatic arrival has likely attracted attention for miles. The golden dragon seemed to consider this, then moved with greater deliberation, powerful limbs finding purchase on the lake bottom. Water cascaded from golden scales as he emerged, too, whirring over her despite being relatively small for a dragon, perhaps 40 feet from snout to tail tip, with a wingspan nearly as wide. A young dragon, then, Irene murmured. Or newly transformed. The latter, I suspect. Given your difficulty with basic movement. The dragon growled, the sound communicating frustration rather than threat. Yes, I imagine it's quite vexing, Irene agreed, sirp. Rising herself with the hint of sympathy in her voice. Now, let us establish some basic communication. 1 growl for yes, 2 for no. Do you understand? A single rumbling growl answered her. Excellent. Are you from Earthland? 2 growls. As I suspected. The energy you radiate is similar to magic but fundamentally different. She tapped her staff thoughtfully against the ground. Were you always a dragon? 2 emphatic growls. Recently transformed, then, deliberately or accidentally. The dragon tilted his head, seemingly unsure how to answer a non-binary question. My apologies. Was your transformation deliberate on your part? 1 growl, but with unexpected consequences, I gather. Irene's lips curved slightly. I know something about that. The golden dragon settled onto the shore, arranging his limbs with careful deliberation. Now that he wasn't moving, Irene could study his form properly. Unlike most dragons she'd encountered, his scales weren't simply metallic but seemed to contain actual gold, giving off a subtle luminescence. Markings resembling intricate tribal patterns adorned his face and flanks, glowing with energy that pulsed in rhythm with his breathing. Most unusual were the whisker-like sensory appendages extending from his snout, reminiscent of certain eastern dragons of legend but rarely seen on western-styled dragons like himself. His eyes, too, were distinctive, slitted pupils of deepest crimson surrounded by irises of purest azure, occasionally shifting to solid gold when he moved certain ways. You are a perplexing creature, Irene said at last. And while I would prefer to continue this rudimentary interrogation, we should relocate. That energy signature you gave off when arriving will draw the Magic Council's attention, and I prefer to avoid their tedious questions. Quote, the dragon rumbled questioningly. Can you fly? Irene asked. When 2 growls answered her, she sighed. Of course not. Very well. There is an abandoned mining complex in those foothills. She gestured toward the western mountains, with caverns large enough to accommodate your current form. I will teleport us there, but I must warn you, the process is disorienting for those unaccustomed to it. Without waiting for his agreement, Irene raised her staff, crimson magic circles expanding beneath them both. The dragon growled in alarm, but before he could move, the spell activated. Reality bent, compressed, and snapped back into focus within the space of a heartbeat. The lakeside vanished, replaced by a vast cavern hewn from living rock. Ancient mining equipment lay scattered about, rusted and abandoned decades ago when the silver veins ran dry. Glowing lacrima embedded in the walls provided dim illumination, activated by Irene's presence. The golden dragon staggered, clearly disoriented by the instantaneous transportation. A strange energy flared around him, golden orange and crimson, swirling in patterns Irene recognized as healing magic. Though unlike any specific type she'd encountered before. Fascinating, she murmured, watching the energy stabilize him. Self-healing capabilities beyond standard dragon physiology. You become more interesting by the moment. Stranger. The dragon shook his massive head, blue eyes focusing on her with renewed intensity. He opened his jaws, and to Irene's surprise, attempted to speak. What emerged was a garbled rumble, but she caught what might have been syllables within the growl. You're trying to form human speech, she realized. Most dragons can speak, but the physiology requires adjustment for those not born to it. Here, Irene approached without fear, extending her staff toward the dragon's throat. This may be uncomfortable, but it will accelerate the process. I'm going to temporarily alter the magical resonance of your vocal structures. The dragon hesitated, then lowered his head in clear permission. Irene placed her hand against the scaled throat, fingers splaying as she channeled her enchantment directly into the complex musculature beneath. The dragon shuddered but remained still as magic rippled through his form. There, she said, stepping back. Try again, slowly. Start with simple sounds. The dragon rumbled, then forced out a recognizable word. Na-ru-to. Naruto. Irene repeated. Is that your name? Yes. The word emerged clearer this time, though still distorted by his draconic vocal apparatus. I am Naruto Uzumaki. Well, Naruto Uzumaki, Irene said, settling onto a chunk of fallen stone with regal posture, you now owe me an explanation. What manner of creature are you, and how did you tear through the dimensional fabric to arrive in my world? Each word felt like pushing boulders uphill, but Naruto persisted. With Rama's help regulating his new physiology and Irene's enchantment facilitating his speech, he gradually explained his situation. The scroll, the Otsutsuki threat, the transformation jutsu that had unexpectedly hurled him across dimensions. Chakra, Irene mused when he finished. We have legends of such energy, but it differs from our magic, Ethernano, in fundamental ways. Your world sounds remarkably different from Earthland. Earth, land, Naruto managed, the name unfamiliar on his tongue. As that, where we are now. Indeed, specifically, the Kingdom of Fury, though we are NTLY near its northern border with 7. Irene tapped her staff thoughtfully against the stone floor. Your arrival presents interesting possibilities. A being capable of cross-dimensional travel, even accidentally, could prove useful. I need to return, Naruto rumbled. My world, in danger. Perhaps, Irene conceded, but first you must master your new form. A rampaging, untrained dragon would be destroyed by this world's authorities before you could accomplish anything useful. The Dragon King Festival left deep scars in human memory. Dragon King Festival, a war between dragons and humans that nearly destroyed civilization centuries ago. Something flickered in Irene's eyes, old pain, quickly suppressed. History is written by the survivors, and humans have long memories for trauma. Naruto settled more comfortably on the cavern floor, wings folding against his sides. You know much about dragons. I should, Irene replied with a sardonic smile. I was one for over 400 years. That revelation stunned Naruto into momentary silence. Even Kurama, who had been providing running commentary within their shared mindscape, fell quiet. You were, like me? Naruto finally asked. Similar yet different. Irene's voice took on a distant quality. I was the first human to undergo dragonification, a process intended as a blessing but which became my prison. Unlike you, I lost my human form entirely, trapped in scales while my human mind slowly succumbed to draconic instincts. How did you change back? Irene's expression hardened. Thrug. Methods I do not recommend and will not discuss. Suffice to say, the cost was considerable. Despite her forbidding tone, Naruto sensed profound isolation behind her words, a loneliness he recognized from his own childhood. Before he could respond, Kurama spoke within his mind. She's not telling the whole truth, but she's not lying either. Her magical signature is complex. Ancient power wrapped in layers of more recent enchantments. Be careful, Naruto. I understand. Isolation, Naruto said aloud, meeting Irene's gaze directly. Was alone, most of my life. Then found precious people, worth protecting. Something flickered in Irene's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at his insight or his directness. She recovered quickly, mask of cool assessment returning. Philosophical discussions can wait, she said, rising gracefully. Your immediate concern should be adapting to your physiology before you accidentally level a town. Dragons are weapons by their very nature, walking natural disasters without proper control. Will you help me? Irene paused, studying him with those ancient eyes. Why should I? Because, Naruto rumbled, drawing himself up to his full height, you recognize power worth cultivating. And because You know this pain. Transformation's price. For several heartbeats, silence filled the cavern. Then Irene laughed, a sound of genuine amusement that seemed to surprise even her. Bold and perceptive, she observed. Very well, Naruto Uzumaki. I will help you master your dragon form, and in exchange, you will tell me everything about your world and this chakra, energy you wield. Knowledge has always been my preferred currency. She approached him without fear, reaching up to place a hand against his golden scales. We begin now. First lesson. A dragon's senses extend beyond physical form. Close your eyes and tell me what you perceive. Naruto obeyed, shuttering azure eyes and focusing inward. At first, nothing changed. Darkness. The sound of Irene's breathing, the smell of stone and old metal. Then, gradually, new sensations emerged. He could feel air currents mapping the cavern's dimensions, taste mineral compositions in the rock. Sense ambient ethernano flowing like invisible rivers through the environment. Most startling was his awareness of Irene herself, not merely her physical presence, but the complex layers of magic surrounding her like nested auras. Her core essence burned with dragon fire, tempered but undiminished by her human form. I sense everything, he breathed, wonder evident even through his rumbling voice. The mountain above us, 3 kilometers thick. Water flowing, 200 meters below. And you. He opened his eyes, staring down at her with new understanding. Dragon and human, both and neither. Irene's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of her surprise. Impressive. Most newly transformed dragons require weeks to develop such sensory acuity. Chakra must be accelerating the process. Within Naruto's mindscape, Kurama snorted. Or maybe I'm helping, you one-eyed scarlet witch. Kurama helps, Naruto explained, seeing Irene's questioning look. The fox, within me. Partner. Quote, you harbor another consciousness. Irene's interest visibly sharpened. Explain. Naruto did, describing the Nine Tails ceiling and their eventual partnership. As he spoke, he found the words coming easier, his control over his dragon voice improving rapidly. A symbiotic relationship with an entity of pure chakra, Irene mused when he finished. Fascinating. In our world, such arrangements typically involve demonic or celestial contracts, not internal cohabitation. He says, you're welcome to visit his apartment anytime, Naruto translated with amusement. Irene's lips quirked. Your fox has questionable taste in jokes. She tapped her staff against the floor. Enough talk. We move to practical application. Can you channel this chakra in your current form? Naruto concentrated, drawing on the familiar energy that had defined his existence. Golden light bloomed around him, illuminating the cavern as chakra manifested visibly along his scales. Unlike his human form, where chakra required specific molding to externalize, his dragon body seemed to amplify and project the energy naturally. Remarkable, Irene breathed, studying the manifestation with expert eyes. Your chakra resonates with Dragon Slayer magic, yet differs fundamentally. Try to focus it toward your breath. Naruto complied, channeling energy toward his throat and lungs. Heat built within his chest, intensifying until it bordered on painful. Now release it, Irene commanded, stepping aside. Aim toward that far wall. Naruto exhaled sharply, expecting perhaps a fireball or energy beam. What erupted instead defied categorization. A concentrated blast of golden energy shot through with crimson streaks, spiraling like a massive Rasengan as it struck the cavern wall. Rock didn't merely shatter but disintegrated, component atoms unraveling under the assault. When the energy dissipated, a perfectly circular tunnel extended at least 50 meters into the mountain. Its interior surfaces glazed to glass-like smoothness. Dimensional sundering breath, Irene observed, surprise evident in her voice. I've only read of such abilities in ancient texts. The transformation spell must have granted you aspects of primordial dragon magic. Naruto stared at the destruction, stunned by his own power. That was unexpected, indeed, and potentially useful, provided you don't accidentally erase half a continent while learning control. Irene approached the tunnel entrance, examining the glass-smooth walls. The energy didn't merely destroy, it severed spatial connections at the quantum level. With refinement, such power could potentially create controlled dimensional gates. Could help me get home, Naruto realized. Eventually, perhaps, but such precision requires mastery far beyond your current capabilities. Irene turned back to him. We have much work ahead, Dragon Child. Over the next several hours, Irene led Naruto through sick exercises in draconic control, movement, flight mechanics, sensory calibration, and energy modulation. Despite her demanding standards and acerbic commentary, she proved a knowledgeable teacher. By nightfall, Naruto could walk without crushing everything underfoot and had achieved brief, wobbly flight within the larger cavern chambers. Acceptable progress, Irene conceded as Naruto landed somewhat gracefully after his 7th attempt at sustained flight. Your adaptability is remarkable. Most newly transformed dragons require weeks to achieve what you've managed in hours. Had good teachers. All my life, Naruto rumbled. Thinking of Iruka, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and countless others who had shaped his journey. And I learn, by doing. A practical approach I can appreciate. Irene summoned a floating light with a casual gesture, illuminating the cavern more brightly as natural daylight faded from the few overhead openings. You've earned rest. Tomorrow we will work on fine control and begin exploring whether your transformation can be reversed or at least modified. You think, I can become human again? Uncertain, Irene admitted. Your transformation differs from any I've encountered. However, the fact that you've maintained complete cognitive function and identity suggests possibilities. At minimum, you might achieve a hybrid state that would allow you to interact with human society without causing mass panic. Naruto settled onto the cavern floor, arranging his massive form as comfortably as possible on the stone. The exhaustion of dimensional travel, transformation, and hours of training crashed over him suddenly. Sleep, Irene commanded, her voice softening marginally. Dragon physiology requires substantial recovery time, particularly following major energy expenditure. As his consciousness began to fade, Naruto realized something odd. Irene hadn't left. Instead, she had settled against the cavern wall nearby, staff across her lap, maintaining her vigilance. You're staying, he mumbled, dragon voice slurring with fatigue. Irene didn't look at him directly. This region has been known to attract wyverns, lesser draconic creatures with more hunger than intelligence. In your current exhausted state, you would be vulnerable. I have no desire to begin our training anew with a different dimensional traveler should you perish on your first night. The explanation was practical to the point of coldness, yet Naruto sensed something beneath the words, a reluctance to abandon him that mirrored his own instinctive protectiveness toward others. Thank you, he rumbled softly, blue eyes drifting closed. Do not mistake pragmatism for sentiment, Dragon Child, Irene replied, but there was less edge to her voice than before. As sleep claimed him, Naruto's last conscious thought was that beneath her formidable exterior, the Dragon Queen carried wounds deeper than she would admit, wounds he recognized because he had healed similar ones in himself and others. Dawn broke over the mountains, pale light filtering through crystal formations in the cavern ceiling to dance across golden scales. Naruto stirred, dragon senses registering changes in air pressure, temperature, and the subtle magic saturation that apparently fluctuated with Earthland's diurnal cycle. He opened azure eyes to find Irene already awake, seated cross-legged in the cavern's center. Surrounded by floating texts of arcane design, she didn't acknowledge his waking, attention fixed on a particularly ancient-looking tome that hovered before her. Naruto took the opportunity to observe her without scrutiny. In the crystalline morning light, Irene Belsarion presented a study in contrasts. Her posture remained regal, shoulders squared beneath an ornate jacket that complemented her scarlet hair. Yet subtle details betrayed her complexity, fingers bearing calluses of a fighter rather than mere royalty, eyes that shifted between calculating coldness and flashes of passionate intensity when she encountered particularly interesting passages. Most telling was the magic that surrounded her like a second skin, layers of enchantments, wards, and transformative spells so densely woven they appeared as a single seamless aura to his dragon senses. Whatever process had returned her human form required constant magical maintenance, suggesting her transformation back from dragon had been incomplete or perhaps inherently unstable. Your observation skills improve, Irene noted without looking up. Though your subtlety requires work. Never been subtle, Naruto admitted. Voice coming easier today. Direct approach. usually works best. A luxury afforded to those with power to force confrontations on their terms. Irene closed her floating books with a gesture, sending them into pocket dimensions with casual efficiency. Nevertheless, perception without revealing one's own attention is a skill worth cultivating. She rose in a single fluid motion, staff materializing in her hand. Today we focus on transformation. Your current form, while impressive, is impractical for most purposes beyond raw destruction. Can I change back? Naruto asked, the question that had haunted his dreams. Perhaps, Irene said, approaching him. Your physiology is unique. The dragon attributes have integrated with your original form rather than replacing it entirely. This suggests potential for reversibility. Hope surged through Naruto, tempered by caution. But forcing such a transformation without proper understanding LD tear you apart at the molecular level. Irene tapped her staff against his golden scales. I spent centuries researching my own condition without finding a solution that didn't require extreme measures. What did you do to change back? Naruto asked directly, remembering her earlier reluctance to discuss the topic. Irene's eyes hardened. I told you that subject is closed. Need to understand the risks, Naruto pressed, meeting her gaze steadily. Won't judge your choices. For a moment, Irene's expression became truly dangerous, magic pressure building around her like an imminent storm. Then, surprisingly, she relented with a sharp exhalation. Very well, a simplified explanation, since you insist. Her voice took on a clinical detachment. After centuries attempting various magics, I finally succeeded by separating my human consciousness from my dragon body, creating a new human vessel, and transferring my essence into it. The process required, she paused, significant sacrifice. You abandoned your original body, Naruto realized. Yes, the dragon I was still exists in a sense, though dormant and mindless without my consciousness to animate it. Something G-like regret flickered across her features. Your situation differs fundamentally. You haven't been a dragon long enough for the transformation to become permanent. There should be ways to shift between forms rather than abandoning either. Quote, within his mind, Kurama stirred. She's right. I can sense your original human form still present within this draconic structure, like a seed inside a fruit. With the right technique, we might access it. Naruto relayed this to Irene, whose interest visibly sharpened. Your fox entity provides useful insight, she acknowledged. Let us experiment with a directed enchantment. I will attempt to stimulate your original form while suppressing the draconic attributes temporarily. She raised her staff, crimson magic circles expanding around them both. This may be uncomfortable. Resist the urge to disrupt the spell, regardless of sensation. Understood. Naruto braced himself, wings tucking tight against his body. The enchantment began subtly, tendrils of scarlet energy wrapping around his golden form, probing rather than constraining. Where they touched, his scales tingled as though brushed by static electricity. Gradually, the sensation intensified, magic seeping beneath his armored exterior to connect with something buried deep within. There, Irene murmured, concentration evident in her furrowed brow. Your original form remains intact, preserved within the transformation matrix rather than overridden. Fascinating. The tendrils thickened, their gentle probing becoming more insistent as Irene channeled additional power through her staff. Pain blossomed along Naruto's spine, radiating outward as conflicting transformative energies battled for dominance. Your chakra resists conventional manipulation, Irene observed, adjusting her approach. It seems to have established a symbiotic relationship with your dragon attributes rather than being subsumed by them. Most unusual. Within his mindscape, Kurama growled in discomfort. This witch's magic is forcing changes your body isn't ready for. We need to establish control before the process tears you apart. Something's wrong. Naruto managed through clenched teeth. Golden scales beginning to emit steam as internal temperatures skyrocketed. Kurama says, your fox needs to cooperate rather than resist, Irene interrupted, scarlet energy intensifying. This process requires harmony between all aspects of your being. Golden chakra erupted across Naruto's form, instinctively countering the external magical pressure. The resulting energy conflict sent shock waves through the cavern, cracking stone and shattering crystal formations overhead. Enough! Naruto roared, the sound reverberating like thunder in the enclosed space. To his surprise, Irene immediately ceased her enchantment, scarlet tendrils dissipating as she lowered her staff. She studied him with narrowed eyes, not angry but reassessing. Interesting, she said finally. Your chakra defa, NDS, your integrated form rather than prioritizing either human or dragon aspects. The transformation is more fundamental than I initially believed, not a shell over your original self but a genuine evolution. Meaning? Naruto asked, golden energy still flickering across his scales. Meaning brute force reversal is unlikely to succeed. Irene tapped her staff thoughtfully against the floor. However, your chakra's adaptive properties suggest an alternative approach. Rather than fighting the transformation, we might teach you to control its expression, to shift between forms at will by redirecting your internal energies. Like a transformation jutsu, Naruto realized. Except I'm transforming between two genuine forms rather than creating an illusion. Precisely. Irene's expressio N showed grudging approval at his quick understanding. The technique would be similar to what I use to maintain this human appearance, though hopefully more stable in your case, given your body's natural adaptability. She gestured for him to follow as she walked toward the cavern entrance. But such delicate work requires proper understanding of your capabilities in your current form. We will see. Continue basic training while I develop an appropriate enchantment sequence. The basic training Irene described proved to be anything but basic. Throughout the day, she drove Naruto through increasingly demanding exercises, aerial maneuvers that strained his newly developed flight muscles, breath attacks requiring precise control over destructive power, and sensory calibration drills that left his mind reeling from information overload. By sunset, Naruto had progressed from clumsy movement to genuine draconic grace, his golden form slicing through mountain air with growing confidence. His roars, once undirected shock waves of sound, could now shatter specific targets while leaving adjacent objects untouched. Most significantly, he had developed rudimentary control over his dimensional sundering breath, able to create small, stable portals between locations rather than simply disintegrating everything in his path. Your adaptation rate exceeds any dragon born or transformed that I've encountered, Irene noted as they returned to the main cavern. Whether this results from your chakra, your fox companion, or some quality inherent to your original being remains unclear. Always been a fast learner, Naruto replied, settling his massive form more comfortably than he had the previous night. Especially with good teachers. Something like surprise flickered across Irene's face. A tears before her customary mask reasserted itself. Flattery is unnecessary. Our arrangement remains mutually beneficial. Not flattery if it's true, Naruto countered, blue eyes meeting her gaze directly. You've helped me when others might have seen only a threat. Perhaps I simply recognize the value of a dimensional traveler with unprecedented abilities, Irene replied coolly. Perhaps, Naruto agreed with what approximated a draconic smile. Or perhaps you remember what it's like to be alone in a new form, feared rather than understood. Irene stilled, her expression unreadable in the fading light. When she spoke again, her voice carried an edge of warning. Do not presume to understand my motivations, dragon child. Centuries of experience separate us. Age doesn't automatically bring wisdom, Naruto observed. Sometimes it just gives more time to practice being wrong. For a moment, the cavern crackled with tension as Irene's magic flared in response to his impudence. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a genuine sound of surprised amusement. Bold indeed, she said, magic subsiding. Most beings who have witnessed even a fraction of my power would not dare speak so directly. Fear makes for poor conversation, Naruto replied simply. And poor learning. Irene studied him with renewed interest, as though seeing beyond his draconic exterior to something she hadn't previously considered. You are an unusual creature, Naruto Uzumaki. Your directness might be refreshing, were it not so potentially dangerous to your continued existence. Been told I have that effect on people, Naruto rumbled, amusement evident in his voice. Eventually they either try to kill me or become my friend. Sometimes both, in that order. I shall endeavor to avoid such predictable patterns, Irene said dryly. She seated herself on a stone outcropping, staff across her lap. Now, tell me more of this world you come from. Knowledge of your reality may provide insights useful to your situation. As night deepened around them, Naruto described the 5 great nations, the ninja world's complex politics, the 4th Great Ninja War, and his own journey from outcast child to respected hero. Irene listened with unfeigned interest, occasionally asking incisive questions that revealed her strategic mind and extensive experience with political machinations. "Your world's chakra system fascinates me," she said when he finished describing the different nature transformations. "It shares conceptual foundations with our magic but follows entirely different principles. In Earthland, magic stems from connection to the natural flow of Ethernano, the ambient magical particles that permeate our reality. Users shape this external energy according to their affinity and training. While chakra comes from within," Naruto observed, "physical and spiritual energies combined." Precisely. A fundamental philosophical difference with practical implications. Irene's eyes gleamed with academic interest. "I wonder how the two systems might interact under controlled conditions." "We're already finding out," Naruto pointed out. "My chakra and your magic have been interacting since we met." "True, but haphazardly rather than systematically." Irene rose, pacing the cavern floor with measured steps. "Tomorrow we should experiment more directly. If we can establish harmony. I see resonance between chakra and Ethernano. It might facilitate your transformation control." Their discussion continued late into the night, ranging from philosophical differences between their worlds to practical applications of their respective powers. Despite her initially forbidding demeanor, Irene proved a knowledgeable and engaged conversational partner, her centuries of experience providing perspectives Naruto found genuinely novel. When they finally fell silent, comfortable in their shared contemplation, Naruto realized something surprising, beneath her layers of power and protection. Irene Belsarion was profoundly lonely. Not merely isolated by circumstance but deliberately self-separating, as though human connection represented greater danger than solitude. He recognized the pattern because he'd seen it before. In Sasuke, in Gaara, in others who had been hurt so deeply they armored themselves against further pain by rejecting connection entirely. His own response to childhood isolation had been the opposite, desperately seeking bonds rather than fleeing them, but he understood both reactions intimately. "You're staring again," Irene observed without looking at him. "Your thoughts are practically audible." "Just thinking," Naruto replied, "that for someone who's lived centuries, you've spent most of them alone." Irene's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "An observation both impertinent and irrelevant to our purpose." "Maybe," Naruto conceded, "but in my experience, people who help strangers without obvious benefit usually have reasons beyond intellectual curiosity." "You presume much on brief acquaintance," Irene said coldly. "Not presuming, just recognizing something familiar." Naruto's voice softened as much as his dragon form allowed. "Lawn. Elinus leaves marks that time doesn't erase, no matter how many years pass." For several heartbeats, silence filled the cavern. When Irene finally spoke, her voice carried an edge of something almost vulnerable beneath its customary steel. "Sleep, dragon child. Tomorrow's training will tax even your remarkable stamina." It wasn't an acknowledgement, but neither was it a denial. Naruto accepted the deflection with a slight nod, settling his massive form more comfortably against the cavern floor. As consciousness faded, he sensed rather than saw Irene watching him with an expression more calm plex than her words suggested. Calculation mingled with something that might, in someone less guarded, have resembled wistful recognition. Dawn's third light found them high above the forest canopy. Golden wings spread wide as Naruto executed a complex aerial maneuver under Irene's critical observation. She hovered nearby, defying gravity through magic rather than physical wings, scarlet hair whipping in the mountain winds. "Your right wing angle is inefficient," she called, voice cutting through the rushing air. "Adjust the primary pinions 15 degrees to maximize lift." Naruto complied, feeling the difference immediately as resistance decreased and his speed increased proportionally. 3 days of intensive training had transformed his awkward flapping into something approaching genuine draconic grace. Though he still lacked the instinctive mastery that would come with greater experience. "Better," Irene acknowledged. "Now demonstrate the dimensional breath control we practiced yesterday. Target that outcropping." She indicated a barren rocky spire rising from the forest below, with precisely enough force to sever its top third without destroying the entire formation. Focusing his energy with careful precision, Naruto gathered golden chakra in his chest, letting it spiral and condense before releasing a concentrated beam that struck the target with surgical accuracy. The mountain spire's upper section vanished, not shattered but cleanly removed from existence, leaving a glassy smooth surface behind. Acceptable, Irene said, which Naruto had learned was IGH praise from the demanding Dragon Queen. Your control improves, though your power output remains inconsistent. You channel excessive energy for simple tasks. Efficient chakra usage. Never been my specialty, Naruto admitted, circling back toward her position. Always had more than I needed. Abundance breeds wasteful habits, Irene observed. Nevertheless, your progress exceeds expectations. I believe you're ready to attempt the transformation enchantment I've developed. Hope surged through Naruto at these words. You think I can change back? Not back, Irene corrected, but between forms. What I propose is not a reversal but a controlled oscillation between your draconic and human aspects. Based on our experiments, your chakra should be capable of maintaining either expression of your fundamental nature. They descended toward a mountain plateau Irene had selected for the attempt, a flat expanse of stone far from human settlements, bordered by ancient pine trees whose twisted forms spoke of centuries battling alpine winds. As Naruto landed, folding golden wings against his sides, Irene began preparing the transformation circle, an intricate pattern of magical symbols etched directly into the stone with her staff. The design combined elements of various magical traditions, runes flowing into sigils that connected with mathematical precision to form a unified whole. This enchantment differs from standard transformation magic, Irene explained as she worked. Rather than imposing an external change, it will resonate with your internal energies, amplify your body's natural capacity for self-modification. Your chakra will do most of the actual work, my magic merely provides structure and direction. When the circle was complete, she motioned Naruto into its center. Stand still. Any movement during the initial resonance phase could disrupt the pattern recognition algorithms. Naruto complied, massive form settling carefully in the precise center of the magical array. The symbols began to glow with amber light as Irene channeled power through her staff, each character activating in sequence. Focus on your human form, she instructed. Not as it was, but as it should be, integrated with your new draconic nature rather than separate from it. Visualization is crucial here. Closing his eyes, Naruto directed his thoughts inward, picturing himself as he had been. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks on human cheeks. But rather than rejecting his dragon aspects, he imagined them incorporated, strength flowing through human muscles. Senses heightened beyond normal capacity, chakra pathways expanded to accommodate his evolved nature. The magic circle pulsed, resonating with his chakra as Irene had predicted. Golden energy rose from his scales, meeting scarlet enchantment in spiraling patterns overhead. Where the energies merged, they created something new, a harmonious fusion that defied classification as either chakra or ethernano alone. Perfect, Irene murmured, her voice distant through the energy roaring in Naruto's ears. Your chakra accepts the magical framework. Now, begin the transition. Imagine your human form emerging from within, like a butterfly from a chrysalis. Pain lanced through Naruto's body as transformation began in earnest. Not the agony of his original change, but sharp discomfort as massive bones compressed. Dense muscles reconfigured, and redundant organs dissolved into pure energy. Golden scales softened, folding inward to become part of his internal structure rather than external armor. Wings collapsed into his back, not disappearing but condensing into potential energy stored within newly formed chakra networks. His elongated snout retracted, facial bones restructuring into human configuration while retaining enhanced sensory capabilities. Throughout the process, Kurama's chakra flowed through his system, preventing shock and tissue damage from the radical transformation. When the metamorphosis finally completed, Naruto stood on two legs for the first time in days, naked and panting in the mountain air. Steam rose from his skin, which gleamed with a subtle golden sheen in the afternoon light. His appearance was recognizably human yet undeniably changed. Hair containing streaks of metallic gold among the blonde, eyes shifting between azure and slitted gold depending on angle. And skin marked with faint patterns that resembled his draconic scaling in moments of strong emotion. Successful conversion, Irene observed, approaching to examine him clinically. Al with significant integration of draconic attributes, as expected. How do you feel? Naruto flexed his fingers, marveling at the familiar yet altered sensations. Different. Stronger. Like everything's. More. He looked up, meeting her gaze with eyes that flashed gold before settling back to blue. Thank you. Irene waved away his gratitude with a dismissive gesture, though something like satisfaction showed in her expression. A simple application of enchantment principles. You should be capable of reversing the process at will, now that your body understands the transformation pathway. She manifested clothing with a casual gesture, practical garments in black and gold that appeared around Naruto's form without requiring his movement. Your original attire would likely have been destroyed in the initial transformation. These should suffice until you can acquire more. Naruto examined the clothing, a sleeveless tunic and loose pants reminiscent of his usual style, though rafted from materials he didn't recognize. They're perfect. Though I'm surprised the Dragon Queen keeps men's clothing on hand. I created them from raw ethernano, shaped according to basic patterns. Irene explained with a hint of impatience. Now, attempt to reverse the transformation. Focus on your draconic form with clear intent. Naruto nodded, centering himself as he had during countless jutsu practices throughout his life. The process proved remarkably intuitive, like accessing a newly discovered chakra nature rather than performing an unfamiliar technique. Golden energy surged through his pathways, and his body responded eagerly, expanding and shifting with fluid grace. Within moments, his human form had given way to the golden dragon once more, the transformation smoother and less painful than the previous conversion. The magical circle beneath him glowed briefly before fading, its purpose fulfilled now that his body had established the necessary pathways. Even more impressive, Irene noted, genuine approval coloring her voice. Your adaptation rate continues to exceed all reasonable expectations. Few beings could master such complex transformation with so little practice. I've had some experience with transformations, Naruto rumbled, thinking of his various chakra modes over the years. Though usually not this extensive. Return to human form, Irene instructed. We should test your ability to transform without the enchantment circle's assistance. Again Naruto focused, visualizing the change, and again his body responded, golden scales receding as human form reasserted itself. The process was even smoother this time, requiring mere seconds rather than minutes. Excellent, Irene said, satisfaction evident in her tone. With practice, you should be able to shift forms nearly instantaneously, perhaps even performing partial transformations to access specific draconic attributes while maintaining human appearance. Naruto grinned, feeling more himself despite the changes he'd undergone. This opens up some interesting possibilities for combat. Indeed, though I suggest discretion regarding public displays of your abilities. Irene tapped her staff against the stone. Dragons remain controversial figures in this world. The Magic Council would take immediate interest in your existence, particularly given your dimensional origins. Speaking of which, Naruto said, expression growing more serious, I need to find a way back to my world. The Otsutsuki threat won't have disappeared because I did. Irene studied him thoughtfully. Your dimensional sundering breath suggests possibilities, though controlling such power with sufficient precision would require extensive practice. We should conduct experiments under controlled conditions. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I appreciate all your help, but I got the impression you prefer working alone. And I prefer not having random dimensional tears appearing across Earthla. Due to amateur attempts at reality manipulation, Irene replied dryly. Consider my continued assistance an investment in multiversal stability. Naruto laughed, the sound startlingly human after days of draconic rumbling. Fair enough. Where do we start? Before Irene could answer, a new presence registered on both their senses, powerful, focused, and rapidly approaching from the west. Naruto tensed, instinctively shifting into a defensive stance. Interesting timing, Irene murmured, turning toward the disturbance. It seems news of your arrival has spread despite our precautions. Friend or foe? Naruto asked, chakra gathering beneath his skin, ready to trigger transformation if needed. Neither, necessarily. Irene's expression revealed nothing of her thoughts. An interested party with her own agenda, I suspect. The air shimmered approximately 50 meters away, coalescing into a teleportation circle of intricate design. From within it stepped a woman whose presence commanded attention despite her diminutive stature. Silver white hair framed severe features, and ornate robes marked her as someone of significant authority. Most striking were her eyes, sharp, assessing, and ancient in a way that reminded Naruto immediately of certain venerable kage he had encountered. Irene Belsarian, the newcomer said, voice carrying easily across the plateau. I thought I recognized your magical signature. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, narrowing slightly. And you must be the dimensional anomaly that has the Magic Council in such a state of agitation. Interesting that you appear human now. When initial readings suggested draconic energy. Counselor Belno, Irene acknowledged with cool formality. Your appearance is unexpected. The council typically sends underlings for preliminary investigations. These are hardly typical circumstances. Belno approached with measured steps, magic rippling subtly around her form, not threatening but prepared. Multiple dimensional disturbances, unprecedented energy signatures, and your involvement all justify direct attention. Her gaze returned to Naruto, who met it squarely. You have a name, I presume. Naruto Uzumaki, he replied. Deciding directness would serve better than evasion. I'm not here to cause trouble. Few interdimensional entities announce destructive intentions in advance, Belno observed dryly. Yet trouble seems to follow such arrivals with remarkable consistency. The boy poses no threat to Earthland's security, Irene interjected. I've been monitoring his activities and capabilities since his arrival. How reassuring, Belno said with evident skepticism. The Dragon Queen vouches for a being capable of tearing holes in reality. Forgive me if that fails to alleviate council concerns. Naruto stepped forward, drawing both women's attention. I understand your caution. In my world, we'd react the same way to unexpected visitors with unknown powers. He met Belno's gaze directly. I'm willing to answer your questions and cooperate with reasonable restrictions while I'm here. All I want is to find a way back to my world without causing damage to yours. Something like Sir. Prize flickered across Belno's features before her official mask reasserted itself. A refreshingly straightforward position, if genuine. It is, Naruto assured her. Where I come from, I'm responsible for protecting people. I don't abandon that duty just because I'm in a different dimension. Belno studied him silently for several moments, magic senses clearly probing his truthfulness. Finally, she nodded slightly. Very well, Naruto Uzumaki. The council will require a full debriefing regarding your origins, abilities, and intentions. Afterward, we can discuss what resources might be available to assist your return journey. And in exchange, Naruto asked, recognizing a diplomatic opening when he heard one. In exchange, you will submit to certain monitoring protocols and agree not to use your more disruptive abilities without prior authorization. Belno's expression remained stern but not hostile. These terms are non-negotiable if you wish council assistance rather than containment. Naruto glanced at Irene, whose subtle nod confirmed this was likely the best offer they would receive. Agreed, with one condition. Irene continues to oversee my training and research. She understands my situation better than anyone else would. Belno's eyebrows rose fractionally. You place remarkable trust in someone known throughout Fury as the Scarlet Despair. I trust what I've seen myself. Naruto replied simply. She could have eliminated or exploited me when I arrived disoriented and vulnerable. Instead, she helped me adapt and understand this world. That counts for something where I come from. Unexpected emotion flickered across Irene's features, surprise, perhaps, or something more complex, before her customary mask returned. She said nothing, but her posture shifted subtly, the distance she maintained between herself and others decreasing by mere centimeters. A fascinating assessment, Belno murmured, gaze shifting between them thoughtfully. Very well, the arrangement may continue under council oversight. She extended a hand, a crystalline lacrima materializing above her palm. This communication device will allow you to contact me directly should circumstances change. I expect regular updates on your progress. Naruto accepted the crystal, tucking it into his tunic. Thank you, counselor. Don't thank me yet, Naruto Uzumaki. Belno's expression remained grave. Your presence here has already catalyzed events beyond this immediate situation. The barriers between dimensions have grown thinner since your arrival, and you are likely not the only entity to notice. With those ominous words, she stepped backward, teleportation circle reactivating around her. I will expect you both at Era within 3 days for formal documentation and assessment. Until then, try not to tear any more holes in our reality. She vanished in a flash of light, leaving Naruto and Irene alone once more on the windswept plateau. Well, Naruto said after a moment. That went better than expected. Indeed, Irene's voice carried a note of genuine surprise. Belno is not known for flexibility or trust regarding unknown quantities. Your diplomatic skills are more developed than your appearance suggests. Naruto shrugged, a hint of his old grin appearing. Years of talking people out of killing each other develops certain talents. So it seems. Irene tapped her staff thoughtfully against the stone. This development both complicates and simplifies our situation. Council resources could accelerate your return capabilities significantly, their oversight will restrict experimental approaches. I've worked with restrictions before, Naruto said. And having official cooperation beats being hunted as a dimensional fugitive. A pragmatic assessment. Irene turned, gazing toward the distant horizon where Era's spires would be visible on a clearer day. We should prepare for the council meeting. Their interrogation techniques can be invasive for those unprepared. Naruto nodded, already considering strategies. In some ways, this new world's politics felt familiar. Powerful figures balancing competing interests, organizations with unclear motivations, and the constant undercurrent of potential conflict beneath diplomatic facades. Yet as he followed Irene toward the mountain path that would return them to their temporary base, he couldn't shake the feeling that Belno's warning held more immediate significance than either of them recognized. The dimensional barriers had indeed grown thinner. He could feel it in the subtle resistance of the air around him, in the occasional dissonance between chakra and ethernano that rippled through his awareness. Something was coming, or perhaps, more worryingly, someone. After 1 end Chapter 2, Scales of Understanding. Golden sunlight spilled across Era's white towers, the headquarters of Fiore's Magic Council gleaming like a beacon against the azure sky. Inside the central examination chamber, Naruto stood within a complex magical circle as ethereal sensors analyzed his unique physiology. 3 days had passed since Counselor Belno's unexpected appearance, and true to her word, the council had been thorough in their assessment, perhaps excessively so. The dimensional resonance patterns are unlike anything in our records, observed a blue-robed technician, adjusting a floating lacrima crystal. His chakra system functions on principles that contradict established magical theory. Irene watched from the periphery, arms crossed beneath her ample chest, express Reshin revealing nothing of her thoughts. She had accompanied Naruto as agreed, though the council's obvious discomfort with her presence manifested in the 4 elite rune knights positioned strategically around her. Can we conclude the examination? Naruto asked, maintaining his polite tone despite growing impatience. This marked the 5th hour of continuous testing, with various council mages prodding his energy systems with increasingly intrusive magical implements. Nearly complete, replied the lead examiner, an elderly man with a monocle that glowed with analytical enchantments. We require one final assessment of your transformative capabilities. Naruto exchanged glances with Irene, who offered an almost imperceptible nod. With practiced focus, he channeled his internal energies. Golden light shimmering across his skin as transformation began. The process had become significantly smoother with practice. What had initially taken minutes now required mere seconds. His human form expanded, muscles densifying as bones elongated and rearranged. Golden scales erupted across his body in symmetrical patterns, wings unfurling from his back with a sound like unfastening sails. The examination chamber, large as it was, suddenly seemed confining as his draconic form reached full manifestation. Several technicians stumbled backward, theoretical understanding clearly different from witnessing the transformation firsthand. Even the rune knights shifted nervously, hands moving toward weapons before discipline reasserted control. Fascinating, breathed the monocled examiner, apparently alone in his unfazed response. A complete physiological restructuring rather than a simple shape-shifting enchantment. The magical efficiency is unprecedented. If you're quite finished, Irene interjected coolly. We have fulfilled our obligation to your examination protocols. The council agreed to provide resources for dimensional research in exchange for cooperation, not unlimited experimentation. The examiner looked prepared to argue, but Councillor Belno's timely arrival interrupted his protest. She entered the chamber with the measured pace of one accustomed to authority. Silver-white hair framing a face that had grown more severe since their mountain meeting. "The examination is concluded," she announced, dismissing the technical staff with a gesture. When only the Rune Knights remained, she addressed Naruto directly. "Your cooperation is noted and appreciated, Uzumaki-san. The council has reviewed preliminary findings and reached certain decisions regarding your situation." Naruto returned to human form, the golden light receding as scales melted back into skin. "I'm listening," he replied, pulling on the council-provided tunic that had been designed to accommodate his transformations. "You present unique challenges from a regulatory perspective," Belno stated. "Your abilities exceed standard classification within our magical framework, and your daimon Sional origin raises sovereign jurisdiction questions our legal scholars find perplexing. Bureaucracy remains consistent across dimensions, it seems," Irene observed dryly. Belno ignored the comment. "Nevertheless, the council has provisionally classified you as a non-hostile extradimensional entity with supervised residency status. You will be permitted access to certain research facilities and historical archives pertaining to dimensional magic, under specified conditions." "And those conditions?" Naruto asked. "First, you will reside at a council-approved location where your activities can be monitored. Second, you will refrain from unauthorized transformations or dimensional manipulation attempts. Third, you will submit to weekly energy assessment protocols." Naruto considered these terms, blue eyes briefly flashing gold as his draconic aspect stirred beneath the surface. "The monitoring I understand, but I need freedom to practice control. A dragon's abilities aren't switching a light on and off, they require constant refinement. Which is why," Belno continued, "the council has reluctantly approved Irene Belsarian's continued role as your instructor, despite significant reservations regarding her history." Irene's lips curved slightly. "How magnanimous. Don't mistake political necessity for trust, Belsarian," Belno replied sharply. "Your knowledge of draconic transformation is unique and pertinent to this situation. Nothing more." "Where will this council-approved location be?" Naruto asked, stepping subtly between the women before their evident tension could escalate. "The former Heartfilia estate," Belno answered. "Recently acquired by the council for research purposes, it provides both the necessary isolation and magical infrastructure. He grounds are extensive enough for your transformed state without threatening civilian populations." Naruto glanced at Irene, whose minute nod suggested the location was acceptable. "And access to research materials. The estate library has been supplemented with relevant texts from the council archives. Additionally, you will be granted supervised access to Era's restricted collections as needed." Belno produced a sealed document. "These terms are formalized here. Your signature constitutes legally binding agreement." Taking the parchment, Naruto scanned its contents, grateful for his RS deciphering mission parameters and diplomatic correspondence. The language was complex but not deceptive. The terms matched Belno's verbal summary without hidden clauses or exploitation angles. "Acceptable," he said, accepting the quill she offered and signing with practiced ease. As the ink dried, magical symbols briefly illuminated across the page, binding him to the agreement through more than mere convention. "Very well." Belno collected the document. "Transportation to the estate has been arranged. You will find appropriate accommodations and initial research materials prepared. CIL representatives will contact you regarding scheduled assessments." As she turned to leave, Naruto called after her, "Counselor, what about dimensional disturbances? You mentioned barriers thinning since my arrival." Belno paused, something like genuine concern briefly visible beneath her official demeanor. "We have detected 17 anomalous energy signatures across Fury in the past week. Whether these represent actual incursions or merely weakened boundary points remains unclear. The council is investigating. I'd like to help with that investigation," Naruto said. "If these disturbances connect to my world, I might recognize signatures or patterns your people would miss." For a moment, Belno seemed to weigh political protocol against practical necessity. Finally, she nodded. I will arrange for anomaly reports to be included with your research materials. Your insights would be valuable. After she departed, the Rune Knights escorted Naruto and Irene through Era's lobby. Rinthine corridors toward the transportation platform. Neither spoke until they were alone in the teleportation chamber, waiting for the technicians to calibrate coordinates. That was surprisingly reasonable, Naruto observed quietly. I expected more restrictions. The council fears what it doesn't understand, Irene replied. But it fears losing control of powerful entities even more. By granting supervised freedom, they maintain the illusion of authority while acquiring your voluntary cooperation. You don't sound impressed with their governance. I've watched the council evolve over centuries, Irene said, crimson hair shifting as she adjusted her ornate headpiece. Different faces, identical limitations. They manage magical incidents adequately but lack vision regarding fundamental forces. Before Naruto could respond, the teleportation circle activated beneath them, magic enveloping their forms as reality distorted. Unlike his chaotic dimensional journey, this transporta Tion felt structured and controlled, a precisely calculated shift through space rather than a violent tear between worlds. They materialized on a stone platform overlooking expansive grounds. The Chi Filia estate spread before them, a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured gardens that gradually gave way to wilder forests and rolling hills. Mountains rose in the distance, providing natural boundaries and privacy. Adequate, Irene assessed, surveying the property with practiced eyes. The magical conductivity of the soil is above average, likely why the council acquired it. We can establish proper training areas without significant modification. A staff member approached. A young woman with wire-framed glasses and the nervous demeanor of someone recently assigned to accommodate potentially dangerous guests. Mr. Uzumaki, Lady Belsarion, welcome to the research facility. I'm Meredith, your administrative liaison. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your accommodations and explain the facility's resources. They followed her through the mansion's imposing entrance into a foyer of marble and mahogany. Despite its conversion to research purposes, the building retained the chair of a family estate. Portraits of previous owners still adorned certain walls, and architectural details spoke of personal taste rather than institutional design. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Meredith explained, leading them down a corridor. We've prepared adjacent suites with access to private gardens. The main library has been expanded with the council materials, and several outbuildings have been converted to specialized workspaces. Naruto listened politely, though his attention drifted to the magical signatures permeating the property. Beneath the surface enchantments, security wards, communication lacrimas, and observation spells, he detected something older and more fundamental. The land itself seemed to resonate with accumulated magical history, layers of ethernano settled like geological strata. The property has significant magical heritage, he observed, interrupting Meredith's recitation of meal schedules. She blinked, clearly surprised by his perception. Yes, that's correct. The Hartfilia family maintained celestial spirit contracts for generations. Their magical practices left residual signatures that the council considers valuable for certain research applications. Celestial spirits, Naruto questioned, the concept unfamiliar. Extraplanar entities summoned through contractual keys, Irene supplied. This dimension hosts various adjacent realms with different magical properties. The celestial spirit world is among the more accessible, which may be relevant to your situation, Meredith added, professional interest overcoming her initial nervousness. Cross-dimensional travel theory often references celestial space as a transitional medium. Some of the research materials address this specifically. They reached a junction where the corridor divided. One branch leading to a massive library visible through open double doors, the other continuing toward residential areas. Perhaps we should begin with the research materials, Irene suggested. Her interest clearly piqued by the library's contents. Accommodation details can wait. Meredith hesitated, then nodded. Of course, the library is organized by magical discipline, with dimensional theories in the East alcove. Council materials are sealed with permission enchantments. You'll need to provide magical signatures to access restricted texts. The library proved even more extensive than its entrance suggested, a two-story chamber with spiral staircases connecting multiple levels and alcoves. Windows of stained glass cast prismatic patterns across thousands of leather-bound volumes, while magical lighting illuminated darker corners where more sensitive materials resided. "I'll leave you to your research," Meredith said. "Meal service begins at 7. Should you require anything else." Communication lacrimas are located throughout the facility. After she departed, Naruto wandered toward the dimensional theory section, tracing his fingers along book spines inscri. Bed with titles in languages he didn't recognize. "Where do we start?" "With fundamentals," Irene replied, already selecting volumes with practiced efficiency. "Your world's chakra system operates on principles distinct from Earthland's Ethernano. Understanding the translational mechanics between energy types will be essential for controlled dimensional transit." They established a comfortable rhythm over the following hours, Irene identifying relevant texts, Naruto absorbing information with the focused determination that had characterized his ninja training. His shadow clone technique proved particularly useful, allowing multiple copies to review different materials simultaneously. "Your duplication ability would revolutionize academic research if widely available," Irene observed. "What?" Ching 3 Naruto's compare ancient scrolls at adjacent tables. "Used to hate studying," the original admitted with a slight grin. "Never had the patience for it until I realized knowledge could directly improve my techniques." A pragmatic approach to education. Irene's lips curved slightly. "Though I suspect your instructors found it frustrating. Uruka-sensei nearly had an aneurysm trying to keep me focused on history lessons." Naruto agreed, fondness evident in his tone. "Took years to appreciate why understanding the past matters for shaping the future." As sunset approached, they had assembled a promising collection of relevant materials, theories of dimensional boundaries, historical accounts of cross-realm travel, and technical analyses of energy conversion between magical systems. Most significantly, they discovered references to resonance anchors, individuals who had successfully traversed dimensions by establishing energetic connections with their origin points. "This could be crucial," Naruto said, indicating a particular passage. "If someone from my world established a connection from their side, it might create a stable pathway rather than another random tear. Assuming anyone in your dimension possesses both the capability and knowledge to attempt such a connection," Irene noted. "Does anyone there understand your situation?" Naruto considered this, absently running fingers through blonde hair that shimmered with subtle golden highlights in the fading light. "Maybe. My shadow clone disappeared when I transformed, but it might have survived long enough to report what happened. And there's one person who might have both the ability and determination to track me." "Someone significant to you." Irene's tone remained neutral, though her gaze sharpened slightly. "Hinata," Naruto confirmed. "She possesses the Byakugan, eyes that can see across vast distances and through dimensional barriers under certain conditions. If anyone could track my chakra signature across worlds, it would be her. Thousands of miles away and across dimensional boundaries, Hinata Hyuga knelt in perfect Seiza position within the sacred circle. Arcane symbols Suro, wounded her, a combination of Fuinjutsu formulas, Hyuga clan markings, and theoretical constructs developed through weeks of desperate research. "Chakra levels stable," reported Shikamaru from his monitoring position. "Dimensional resonance approaching optimal parameters. Blood pressure and neurological patterns within acceptable ranges," added Sakura, medical chakra glowing around her hands as S. He maintained Hinata's physical stability. "But we shouldn't extend beyond 30 minutes for this attempt." Hinata acknowledged their concerns with a slight nod, but her focus remained absolute. 6 weeks had passed since Naruto's disappearance. 6 weeks of increasingly desperate searching after his shadow clone had dissipated with fragmentary information about a transformation scroll and dimensional disruption. Tsunade had initially declared interdimensional rescue attempts too theoretical and dangerous to authorize. It had taken combined pressure from Kakashi as Hokage, Sasuke's reluctant testimony regarding dimensional jumping, and Hinata's uncharacteristically fierce determination to secure resources for the attempt. "Beginning primary sequence," she announced softly, activating her Byakugan. Chakra vessels expanded throughout her system as her dojutsu engaged, not merely the standard chakra network visible to normal Byakugan use, but an enhanced perception developed specifically for this purpose. For weeks, She had trained to extend her visual range beyond normal limitations, incorporating techniques adapted from both Hyuga Forbidden Scrolls and Otsutsuki knowledge Sasuke had reluctantly shared. Veins bulged around her pale eyes as chakra concentrated behind them, enhancing visual acuity beyond ordinary physical constraints. The room around her faded from perception as her consciousness extended outward, pushing through invisible barriers that separated dimensional planes. At first, she encountered only resistance, the natural boundaries between worlds manifesting as distortive pressure against her perception. Then, gradually, her specialized training began to yield results. Gaps appeared in the barriers, microscopic fissures where reality had already been weakened. Dimensional stress patterns detected, she reported, voice strained from concentration. Multiple fissure points forming a directional array. They're like footprints. Naruto's transition must have created weakness patterns. Shikamaru theorized. Follow the highest concentration gradient, it should lead toward his destination. Hinata adjusted her focus, tracing the pattern of weaken. Ed points through the dimensional membrane. Each fissure emanated residual chakra that bore Naruto's distinctive signature, though altered in ways she couldn't immediately identify. Found primary rupture point, she announced as her perception locked onto a particularly significant tear. Attempting penetrative observation, concentrating chakra with precision that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Hinata projected her Byakugan's perception through the dimensional fissure. For a moment, disorienting vertigo threatened her focus as visual information from another reality flooded her consciousness. Then clarity returned as her brain adapted to interpret the unfamiliar sensory data. A world materialized before her extended sight, similar to their own in broad geography but mentally different in its energetic composition. Rather than the chakra networks that characterized her native dimension, this world pulsed with another energy altogether, more ambient and less structured, flowing through environment and organisms alike. Visual contact established, she reported. The parallel dimension appears physically similar but operates on different energetic principles. The ambient energy is foreign but not incompatible with chakra. Can you locate Naruto? Sakura asked, medical chakra pulsing more intensively as she stabilized Hinata's increasingly taxed system. Scanning geographical parameters, Hinata responded, extending her perception across vast distances within the foreign dimension. The effort strained her capabilities to their limits. Even with her enhanced Byakugan, searching an entire world would normally be impossible. But Naruto's chakra had always been distinctive to her perception, brilliantly bright and uniquely patterned. If he existed in this dimension, she would find him. Minutes passed in tense silence as her consciousness raced across foreign landscapes, cities unlike any she recognized, magical constructs that defied conventional understanding, and beings whose nature seemed fundamentally different from humans of her world. Then, suddenly, she found him. Contact, she gasped, emotion briefly disrupting her carefully maintained focus. Visual confirmation established. The others waited silently as she studied what her enhanced vision revealed. When she finally spoke, confusion colored her voice. He's changed, she said softly. His chakra signature remains recognizable but has integrated with the foreign energy system. And his physical form, is he injured? Sakura demanded immediately. No, not injured, Hinata clarified. Transformed. His body appears human currently, but I can see the structural modifications. Denser bone structure, modified chakra pathways, cellular compositions unlike anything I've seen before. She paused, processing further visual information. He's in some kind of extensive library or research facility. Not alone, there's a woman with him. Her energy signature is complex, ancient, powerful. Can you establish communication? Shikamaru asked. Not directly, Hinata admitted. But I can maintain this observational window. With Ino's assistance, we might attempt telepathic contact during the next session. Time limit approaching, Sakura warned. You need to disengage safely. Reluctantly, Hinata began withdrawing her perception, carefully retracing her path through the dimensional fissure. As her consciousness contracted back toward her physical form, she permitted herself one final glimpse of Naruto, his familiar features now subtly altered with golden highlights in his hair and occasional flashes of inhuman gold in his eyes when he turned certain ways. Disengagement complete, she announced as her perception returned fully to their dimension. The Byakugan deactivated, chakra vessels returning to normal configuration as tension drained from her body. What did you see? Tsunade demanded, stepping forward from her observation position. Hinata met her gaze steadily. The timidity that had once characterized her interactions with authority figures long since replaced by quiet confidence. I found him. He's alive and apparently working to return. But something fundamental has changed about his nature. She described what she'd observed. Naruto's altered physiology, the research facility, and the scarlet-haired woman assisting him. As she spoke, Tsunade and Shikamaru exchanged concerned glances. The dimensional transition appears to have triggered a profound transformation, Tsunade concluded. Whether this represents enhancement or corruption remains unclear without direct examination. It doesn't matter, Hinata stated with uncharacteristic firmness. Whatever he's become, he's still Naruto. And I'm going to bring him home. Shikamaru sighed, recognizing the determination in her opal eyes. Troublesome as always, but if anyone can navigate dimensional barriers through sheer stubborn will, it would be someone connected to Naruto. We'll need to refine the technique, Sakura advised, checking Hinata's vital signs. Your chakra system showed significant strain during the observation. Actual physical transition would require substantially more power and stability. Then we'll refine it, Hinata replied simply. Whatever it takes. As the others discussed technical modifications and resource requirements, Hinata's thoughts remained fixed on what she had seen. Naruto had changed, become something neither fully human nor entirely other. Yet beneath the physical alterations, she had recognized the essential nature. That defined him, the unwavering determination, compassionate spirit, and inherent warmth that had drawn her to him since childhood. Whatever he had become, whatever challenges separated them, she would find her way to him. Across dimensions if necessary. Moonlight spilled through the library windows, casting long shadows across ancient texts and diagrams spread across the reading tables. Naruto rubbed his eyes, momentarily disoriented after hours of concentrated study. Across from him, Irene continued analyzing a particularly complex magical formula, seemingly untouched by fatigue. You should rest, she observed without looking up. Your transformed physiology requires proper sleep cycles to maintain stability, particularly during the adaptation phase. I'm fine, Naruto insisted. Though a jaw-cracking yawn undermined his claim. Just need to understand these resonance principles, which you won't accomplish with diminished cognitive function. Irene closed her book with uncharacteristic gentleness. The materials will remain available tomorrow. Your dragon aspects require proper integration periods, which includes adequate rest. Reluctantly acknowledging her expertise, Naruto stood and stretched, noticing how his movements had subtly changed since the transformation. His balance had shifted, muscles responding with greater efficiency even in human form. Did you experience this? He asked suddenly. The constant awareness of your altered nature, even when appearing human. Irene's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a moment of genuine recognition or her customary reserve reasserted itself. Yes, the draconic aspects never truly recede, they merely accommodate human limitations temporarily. Does it get easier? The adjustment, not easier, she replied after a thoughtful pause. More familiar. You never fully forget what you were, nor entirely reconcile with what you've become. You simply learn to exist at the intersection of both natures. The unexpected candor surprised him. Throughout their interactions, Irene had maintained professional distance, sharing knowledge but rarely personal insight. This glimpse of shared experience felt significant somehow. Thank you, he said simply, for understanding what others couldn't. Something flashed in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or memory. Few have experienced transformation of this magnitude. Those who haven't cannot comprehend how it reshapes one's fundamental understanding of self. They walked together through the mansion's quiet corridors, moonlight streaming through occasional windows to illuminate their path. The silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward, a shared understanding that required no verbal reinforcement. At the junction where their respective quarters diverged, Naruto paused. Tomorrow I'd like to begin practical experiments with the dimensional resonance theories. Some of those techniques might work better with my dragon form's abilities. Agreed. The eastern hills provide sufficient isolation for larger-scale testing. Irene adjusted her ornate headpiece, a gesture Naruto had come to recognize as her version of considering options. We should also incorporate your chakra-based techniques with Earthland magical principles. The hybrid approach may yield better results than either system independently. Sounds like a plan. Naruto offered a slight smile. Good night, Irene. Her return nod was formal but not cold. Rest well, dragon child. In his assigned quarters, luxurious by any standard, with a massive 4-poster bed and adjoining bathing chamber, Naruto found himself restless despite physical fatigue. His mind continued processing the day's discoveries while his enhanced senses catalogued unfamiliar stimuli throughout the estate. He stepped onto the private balcony, inhaling night air saturated with botanical scents from the gardens below. Stars wheeled overhead in configurations he didn't recognize. A constant reminder of his displacement from everything familiar. Within his mindscape, Kurama stirred from his semi-dormant state. You're brooding again. Thinking. Naruto corrected. There's a difference. Semantics. The fox's presence expanded through their shared consciousness. You worry about your previous world while simultaneously adapting to this one. The divided focus benefits neither effort. Hard not to worry, Naruto admitted. If the Otsutsuki obtained other transformation scrolls or continued their plans, then your friends will handle it, as they have other threats when you weren't available. Kurama countered. Kakashi, Sasuke, and the others are hardly helpless without you. That's not. Naruto began defensively before catching himself. You're right, I trust them. I just hate being separated when I might be needed. Your hero complex remains intact despite dimensional displacement, Kurama observed dryly. How reassuring. Naruto chuckled despite himself. Some things don't change, even with scales and wings. His amusement faded as he considered their current situation more seriously. What do you think of Irene? Really? The fox was silent for a moment, considering. She is damaged in ways that mirror your own experiences, though manifested differently. Centuries of isolation have calcified around her psyche like protective armor. Yet beneath that, something essential remains unbroken, a capacity for connection she denies even to herself. That's surprisingly insightful, Naruto observed. I have observed humans for centuries, Kurama reminded him. And I recognize patterns of isolation and its consequences better than most. Naruto nodded, remembering how they had both suffered from different forms of the same fundamental wound, rejection and fear from those who might otherwise have connected with them. She's helping us without obvious benefit to herself, he noted. Despite her reputation apparently being complicated here. The Scarlet Despair title suggests historical actions inconsistent with her current behavior, Kurama agreed. Though people with power are often feared regardless of intention. Something to ask about, maybe. When she's ready to share. Turning from the balcony, Naruto finally surrendered to fatigue, collapsing onto the oversized bed without bothering to remove his council-provided clothing. Sleep claimed him almost immediately, his transformed physiology demanding recovery despite his mental resistance. His dreams were vivid, fragmented images of Konoha interspersed with draconic perspectives soaring above unfamiliar landscapes. Throughout the kaleidoscopic visions, a consistent thread emerged, a sense of being watched by familiar eyes, pale and perceptive, searching across impossible distances. Morning arrived with golden sunlight and the subtle magical resonance that characterized Earthland's diurnal cycle. Naruto woke feeling surprisingly refreshed, his alt-erd metabolism having processed fatigue more efficiently than his original human form would have. After bathing and dressing in training attire provided by the facility, functional garments designed to accommodate partial transformations, he made his way to the main dining hall where breakfast awaited. Irene was already present, examining a three-dimensional magical projection of local topography. While sipping tea with aristocratic precision, "You appear adequately rested," she observed as he entered. Physiological integration proceeds appropriately. "Good morning to you too," Naruto replied with amusement, helping himself to the substantial breakfast spread. His transformed metabolism required significantly more calories, particularly protein, which the kitchen staff had apparently anticipated. "I've identified an optimal location for our experimental work," Irene continued, expanding a section of the magical map. This valley provides natural containment for energy discharges eel offering sufficient space for your transformed state. Naruto studied the indicated area between mouthfuls of food, a sheltered depression surrounded by rocky outcroppings approximately 5 miles from the main estate. Looks good. Any council monitoring we should worry about? I negotiated a non-interference agreement for training purposes, Irene replied. They will maintain perimeter observation but won't interrupt unless energy signatures exceed certain thresholds. You negotiated. When? While you slept. Her tone suggested this should have been obvious. Some matters are better addressed without committee discussions. Quote, after breakfast, they departed on foot, Irene declining magical transportation in favor of allowing Naruto to acclimate to the local environment. The journey took them through manicured gardens that gradually gave way to wilder landscape beyond the estate boundaries. This region was largely uninhabited until the Hartfilia family established their residence, Irene explained as they walked. The unusual ethernano conductivity made conventional agriculture difficult, though ideal for celestial spirit magic. I sense it, Naruto confirmed, his enhanced perception detecting the subtle energy currents flowing through soil and atmosphere. Like underground rivers of power just beneath the surface. A apt analogy. Ethernano concentrations follow a logical pattern similar to watershed dynamics. Irene gestured toward seemingly random rock formations they passed. These outcroppings mark natural collection points where magical energy pools more densely. Their path wound through increasingly rugged terrain until they reached the valley Irene had identified, a natural amphitheater of stone with a flat central area approximately 200 meters across. Shelter from prevailing winds had allowed a small meadow to flourish, wildflowers dotting the green expanse with vibrant colors. Perfect, Naruto assessed, already mentally cataloging how the space would accommodate his dragon form. What do we start with? Transformation control, Irene decided. You've mastered basic shifting between forms, but true mastery requires selective transformation, manifesting specific draconic attributes while maintaining predominantly human appearance. Like partial dragon force, Naruto realized, recalling information from their research materials about dragon slayer magic. Similar in concept, though fundamentally different in execution. Irene positioned herself at the valley's edge, staff planted firmly beside her. Begin with Somethi. Simple. Manifest your wings while maintaining human form otherwise. Naruto nodded, centering himself as he accessed the internal energies that governed his transformation. Rather than initiating complete change, he focused on isolating the specific structures associated with his wings, visualizing their emergence while containing the cascade effect that would normally trigger full draconic manifestation. Golden light shimmered across his back as magic and chakra combined, creating localized transformation. Pain flared briefly as his shoulder blades reconfigured, skin parting to accommodate emerging appendages. The sensation wasn't exactly unpleasant, more strange than painful as his nervous system adapted to additional sensory input. With a sound like unfurling sails, golden wings ended from his back, proportionally smaller than his full dragon forms but still impressive, spanning nearly 15 feet at full extension. Adjusting to their weight required momentary balance compensation, his body automatically strengthening core muscles to support the new appendages. Well done, Irene acknowledged, circling him with analytical attention. The integration is cleaner than XP. No scale manifestation beyond the wing structures themselves, and your human musculature has properly adapted to support them. Naruto experimentally flexed his new appendages, marveling at how naturally they responded to his intentions. They feel right, like they were always meant to be there, just waiting to emerge. Because they were, Irene explained. The transformation didn't create new structures so much as awaken latent potential within your existing form. All humans possess vestigial connections to more primal states, though few can access them without external catalysts. Under her direction, Naruto practiced extending and retracting his wings, eventually progressing to short gliding attempts down gentle slopes. Unlike his full draconic form, which possessed instinctive flight knowledge, these hybrid wings required conscious control and adaptation. The muscles are connected differently in this configuration, Irene explained after his third awkward landing. Attempting to use them as you would in full dragon form, but the biomechanics differ when integrated with a predominantly human skeletal structure. By mid-morning, Naruto had progressed to sustained flight, wobbly and inelegant but functional. The sensation proved exhilarating beyond anything he'd experienced, even compared to his various chakra-enhanced jumping techniques. True flight offered freedom of movement in 3 dimensions that ground-based jutsu couldn't replicate. This is amazing, he called down to Irene, executing a spiraling climb that carried him several hundred feet above the valley floor. The world below spread out in magnificent detail, his enhanced vision capturing nuances invisible to normal human perception. Focus on controlled descent, Irene called back, her voice easily reaching him despite the distance. Landing requires more precision than ascent. Following her instructions, Naruto practiced approaches and landings until they became smooth and natural. By noon, he could transition between ground and air with respectable efficiency, though still lacking the graceful precision that characterized Irene's magical flight. Acceptable progress, he acknowledged when he completed a particularly challenging maneuver involving mid-air hovering. Now attempt manifesting other draconic attributes individually, scales for defense, sensory enhancements, or specialized appendages. Through the afternoon, Naruto experimented with selective transformations, manifesting armored scales across his forearms to block Irene's test strikes, enhancing his Ori organs to detect magical signatures at greater distances, and briefly attempting a tail manifestation that proved more challenging than anticipated. The coccyx transformation requires complete spinal reconfiguration, Irene explained after his third failed attempt left him with an awkwardly truncated appendage. We'll address that specifically in later sessions. As sunset approached, the Y moved to the experimental phase of their agenda, testing how Naruto's unique abilities might facilitate dimensional connections. At the valley's center, Irene established a magical measurement array, concentric circles of arcane symbols designed to detect and analyze energy fluctuations. The theory suggests dimensional sundering requires precisely calibrated energy projection, she explained, completing the final symbols. Your dragon breath demonstrated this capability inherently, but controlled application demands focused intention rather than raw power. Naruto nodded, shifting to his draconic form for this portion of their experiments. The transformation had become significantly smoother with practice, golden light enveloping his body as human limitations gave way to draconic majesty. Within seconds, he stood in golden-scaled glory, wings folded neatly against his sides as azure eyes regarded the magical array. Begin with minimal power, Irene instructed, positioning herself behind specialized ward barriers. Focus on creating a localized distortion rather than actual rupture. Gathering energy in precise configuration, Naruto released a narrowly focused breath attack. Golden energy spiraling toward the array's center. Where it struck, reality visibly distorted, air shimmering like heat waves above summer pavement. Excellent, Irene called, monitoring magical readings from her position. The dimensional fabric shows elasticity rather than tearing. Increase power incrementally, maintaining the same focusing pattern. With each subsequent attempt, Naruto refined his control, learning to modulate energy output while maintaining coherent spiral patterns that seemed particularly effective at manipulating dimensional boundaries. By his 7th attempt, he creates stable distortion fields approximately 1 meter in diameter, reality visibly thinning within these zones though not actually rupturing. The spiraling energy configuration appears key, Irene observed, approaching the latest distortion field with analytical interest. It creates harmonic resonance with the dimensional frequency rather than brute force disruption. Much more controlled than typical dimensional magic. Reminds me of Rasengan principles, Naruto rumbled, his draconic voice having improved significantly with practice. Contained rotation creates effects that raw power alone couldn't achieve. As the sun dipped below the western mountains, they concluded their experiments, Naruto returning to human form while Irene documented their findings in a magical recording crystal. Their progress exceeded initial expectations, particularly regarding the stability of the distortion fields he could now create. Tomorrow we'll attempt actual dimensional viewing, Irene decided as they gathered their equipment. Your control has advanced sufficiently to create non-destructive windows rather than tiers. You think we might actually see my world? Naruto asked, unable to keep hope from coloring his voice. Possibly, though establishing visual connection doesn't guarantee transit capability. Irene's tone remained pragmatic. Observation requires significantly less energy than physical transference. They walked back toward the mansion in comfortable silence, evening shadows lengthening across the path. Unlike their journey outward, Naruto felt fundamentally different, more connected to this world's energies, more confident in his evolved capabilities, and more attuned to the complex being walking beside him. "May I ask something personal?" he ventured as the Y crested the final hill overlooking the estate. Irene's sideways glance conveyed skepticism but not outright refusal. "You may ask. Why are you helping me?" Naruto met her gaze directly. "Beyond intellectual curiosity or council directives. What's your actual reason?" For several moments, Irene said nothing, her expression unreadable in the fading light. When she finally spoke, her voice carried unusual weight. "Because no one helped me," she said simply. 400 years ago, when transformation overwhelmed my humanity, there was no one who understood both aspects of my nature, no one who recognized the person beneath the scales." She continued walking, pace unchanged though something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Your situation differs from mine in significant ways. But the fundamental experience remains similar, existing between states, belonging fully to neither. It is not a path best walked alone." The admission clearly cost her something. Vulnerability owned someone who had spent centuries armoring herself against precisely that. Naruto recognized the gift for what it was and acknowledged it with respectful silence rather than pressing further. As they approached the mansion, lights illuminating windows against the gathering darkness, Naruto felt something he hadn't expected to find in this strange dimension: connection. Not the familiar bonds he'd left behind, but something new and equally significant: understanding from someone who recognized his transformed nature not as alien but as kindred. That night, dreams came again, more vivid and coherent than before. Naruto found himself standing in what appeared to be Konoha's training grounds, though details shifted dreamlike around him. The familiar landscape seemed simultaneously solid and transparent, as though viewed through gauzy fabric. "Naruto-kun." He turned at the voice, instantly recognizable despite the strange acoustics of this dream space. Hinata stood several meters away, her form similarly translucent yet undeniably present. Her Byakugan was activated, veins prominent around opal eyes that seemed to perceive him with perfect clarity despite the dimensional barriers between them. "Hinata," he questioned, instinctively reaching toward her. "How is this possible?" "I found you," she said simply, as though that explained everything. In many ways, it did. Her determination had always been her defining quality, quiet but unshakable once engaged. "It's difficult to maintain the connection, but I can see you now." "You can see what I've become," Naruto realized, suddenly aware that even in this dream space, his appearance carried traces of his transformation, subtle golden highlights and occasional scale patterns visible beneath his skin. "Yes." Her expression showed no fear or rejection, only acceptance and perhaps curiosity. "You've changed, but you're still you." Relief washed through him, an emotion he hadn't realized he'd been carrying until her simple acceptance released it. "I'm trying to find a way back," he explained quickly, aware that their connection might be temporary. "There's a woman helping me understand my new abilities, Irene Belsarian. She knows about transformation because she experienced something similar." "The woman with scarlet hair," Hinata nodded. "I saw her with you in the library. Her energy signature is complex." "You've been watching us?" Naruto asked, surprised. "Only briefly, through dimensional fissures." Hinata's form flickered slightly, suggesting strain. "We're developing a method to reach you, but it requires precise targeting. Can you create a stable reference point? Something we could lock onto from our side?" "We're working on it," Naruto confirmed. "Tomorrow we're attempting dimensional viewing. Creating stable windows rather than temporary tiers. If I can establish consistent resonance patterns, that would help immensely." Hinata's image wavered more pronouncedly. "We don't have much time. Maintain your position at that estate if possible. It has unusual dimensional properties that make observation easier from our side." "Hinata," Naruto reached toward her fading form, "tell everyone I'm okay. And be careful with whatever you're attempting. Dimensional travel is dangerous. I don't want anyone risking themselves unnecessarily. Her smile carried gentle determination. Some risks are necessary, Naruto-kun. Always have been. Before he could respond, her form dissolved completely, dream space collapsing around him. Naruto woke with a start, morning sunlight streaming through his windows. Despite the abrupt transition, certainty remained. That hadn't been merely a dream but actual contact, however tenuous. He dressed quickly and went in search of Irene, finding her in the library where she appeared to have been working through the night. Multiple texts lay open on the reading table, magical diagrams floating above them in three-dimensional projection. "They're looking for me," he announced without preamble. "From my world." Hinata made contact through some kind of dream space projection. Irene looked up sharply, abandoning her research materials. "Impossible. Doctor. Projection requires existing sympathetic connections between dimensions. Not for the Byakugan, apparently." Naruto explained Hinata's capabilities in their brief conversation. "She said they're developing methods to reach me, but need a stable reference point." "Fascinating," Irene murmured, genuinely intrigued. "These visual abilities must function on principles similar to certain lost magics. If they can establish observational connection without proper dimensional anchoring. This changes today's experiments," Naruto pressed. "Instead of just viewing, we need to create a stable marker they can detect. Something distinctive enough to serve as a beacon." "Agreed." Irene closed her books with uncharacteristic haste, already formulating adjustments to their planned activities. "Your chakra signature itself should function as identification, but we need to amplify and stabilize its dimensional resonance." They departed immediately for their experimental valley, breakfast forgotten in their scientific excitement. The morning air carried a crispness that suggested changing seasons, though Naruto had lost track of Earthland's calendar during his intensive research period. At the training site, Irene quickly modified their experimental array, expanding certain sections while condensing others. "If your associates can indeed observe across dimensions, we should create something unmistakable for them to target. Your full draconic form at maximum energy output should provide sufficient distinctiveness." Naruto nodded, initiating transformation with practiced ease. "Go." Elden light enveloped him as human limitations gave way to draconic majesty, wings unfurling to their full impressive span as transformation completed. "Perfect," Irene approved, activating the modified array beneath him. "Now channel your chakra in its most distinctive configuration, whatever would be most recognizable to those familiar with your energy signature." Naruto understood immediately. Gathering natural energy to combine with his own chakra and Kurama's power, he activated the Six Paths Sage mode that had defined his greatest battles. Golden energy erupted around his draconic form, truth-seeking orbs manifesting in orbital arrangement as his eyes shifted to their distinctive cross-patterned sage configuration. The combination of dragon transformation and Six Paths chakra create a visual spectacle beyond anything they'd previously attempted, his golden scales radiating light visible across substantial distances, truth-seeking orbs spinning in complex patterns that distorted space-time around them. "Magnificent," Irene breathed, genuine appreciation evident despite her typically reserved demeanor. "The harmonic resonance between your chakra modes and draconic energy creates unique dimensional signatures. If your associates possess the sensory capabilities you described, this should be unmistakable." For nearly an hour, Naruto maintained this energy configuration while Irene adjusted the supporting array to stabilize and amplify the dimensional resonance patterns. The effort taxed even his extraordinary reserves, dragon form requiring substantial energy independently of the Six Paths mode's demands. "Sufficient," Irene finally declared, allowing him to power down to normal draconic energy levels. "The resonance pattern has established self-sustaining harmonic oscillation. It should remain detectable across dimensional barriers for approximately 72 hours." Naruto returned to human form, steam rising from his skin as excess energy dissipated. "Now we attempt viewing," he decided, unwilling to waste potential connection opportunity. "If they're actively searching, we should try to establish visual contact beyond dream space." Irene nodded agreement, reconfiguring the array for their originally planned experiments. "Your dragon breath created dimensional distortion fields yesterday. Today we'll attempt to stabilize those distortions into actual viewing windows." Returning to dragon form, Naruto focused on the precise energy configuration they had developed, spiraling power contained within careful parameters. Rather than releasing destructive force, he shaped the energy into continuous streams that reinforced dimensional thinning without rupturing the barriers completely. Golden light spiraled from his maw, connecting with Irene's supporting magical framework. Where the energies combined, reality visibly distorted, air rippling like water disturbed by underwater currents. Maintain exactly that output, Irene instructed, channeling additional power through her staff. The dimensional frequency is approaching resonance parameters. The distortion field stabilized, collapsing inward until it formed a roughly circular window approximately 3 meters in diameter. Unlike the chaotic tears that had characterized Naruto's arrival, this opening maintained consistent boundaries, edges shimmering with contained energy that prevented uncontrolled expansion. At first, the window showed nothing but swirling mist, the visual manifestation of dimensional static between realities. Then, gradually, images began forming, fragmentary at first, then increasingly coherent as Irene refined the magical supporting framework. "I see something," Naruto rumbled, dragon vision detecting patterns within the apparent chaos. "Landmarks. Trees. That's Konoha's eastern training ground." The image solidified further, revealing a group of people gathered in circular formation around elaborate seal markings inscribed on bare earth. Naruto immediately recognized Hinata at the formation's center, Byakugan activated as she faced directly toward their dimensional window as though she could perceive it perfectly. Around her stood family, AR figures, Shikamaru monitoring seal configurations, Sakura providing medical support, Tsunade overseeing the entire operation, and Kakashi in Hokage robes observing from slight distance. "They see us," Naruto realized as Hinata's expression changed to one of recognition. Her lips moved, though no sound traversed the dimensional barrier. "Audio transmission requires different harmonic frequencies," Irene explained. Adjusting her magical input, visual connection establishes more readily across dimensional boundaries. Despite the silence, communication occurred through gesture and expression. Hinata pointed to specific seal configurations, then to their dimensional window, clearly indicating connection attempts in progress. Shikamaru's hands moved in rapid calculation adjustments based on what they were observing. "They're using our window as targeting reference," Irene observed with professional admiration. "Clever adaptation. The dimensional coordinates we've established provide triangulation points for their own calculations." For nearly 20 minutes, they maintained the connection, Naruto's draconic energy reserves proving essential for sustained dimensional manipulation. Throughout this period, obvious progress occurred on the other side, seal configurations evolving in response to their stable window. Finally, Hinata made a decisive gesture, hands forming unfamiliar R signs before pressing directly against the central seal. Energy flared visibly even through the dimensional barrier, her Byakugan seemingly staring directly into Naruto's draconic eyes despite the vast separation between realities. Her lips formed words he could easily read, 3 days. Then the connection faded, Naruto's energy reserves finally reaching sustainable limits. The dimensional window collapsed with significantly less disruption than their previous attempts, reality sealing smoothly behind it as Irene's control framework guided the closure process. Returning to human form, Naruto collapsed onto the meadow grass, exhaustion evident despite his transformed stamina. "They're coming," he said with certainty. "They've established connection parameters using our window as reference." Hinata indicated 3 days. "Ambitious timeline," Irene noted, though her tone suggested professional interest rather than criticism. Establishing viewing connection differs fundamentally from achieving physical transit. "Still, your associates appear resourceful. You don't know the half of it," Naruto chuckled weakly. "When Shikamaru and Tsunade focus on a problem together, impossible. Just means they haven't had enough coffee yet." Irene assisted him to sitting position, unexpectedly considerate given her typically aloof demeanor. "Your energy depletion exceeds standard parameters. The dimensional manipulation taxed even your extraordinary reserves." "Worth it," Naruto assured her, gratitude evident despite his fatigue. "We've established connection. Actual retrieval or transit becomes possible now. Not just theoretical." As they rested beside the deactivated array, Naruto found himself experiencing unexpected conflict. The prospect of returning home, his primary object, I've since arrival suddenly presented complications he hadn't anticipated. His transformation had fundamentally altered his nature in ways his friends might not fully comprehend, despite Hinata's apparent acceptance. More surprisingly, he realized he would miss aspects of this world, its unique magical properties that resonated with his transformed nature, the research that had occupied his recent weeks, and most unexpectedly, the complicated woman seated beside him who understood his condition more profoundly than anyone in his home dimension could. "You're contemplative," Irene observed, interrupting his thoughts. "Just considering implications," Naruto admitted. "Going home means explaining all this, the transformation, my new abilities, everything that's happened here. You fear they won't accept what you've become?" Irene's question contained no judgment, merely analytical interest. "No, not exactly." Naruto searched for proper words to express his complex feelings. "They'll accept me regardless. That's never been in question. But understanding is different from acceptance. They haven't experienced transformation like this, the fundamental shift in perception and identity." Irene remained silent for several moments, contemplating his words with unusual thoughtfulness. When she finally spoke, her voice carried rare empathy beneath its customary precision. "The transformed exist between worlds by their nature," she said quietly, "neither fully belonging to their origin state nor completely integrated into their new form. It is the burden of our kind to bridge perspectives others consider mutually exclusive." She gazed toward the distant mountains, expression momentarily unguarded. "Perhaps that is precisely why your return holds value beyond personal reunion. You carry understanding between worlds that would otherwise remain separated by more than mere dimensional barriers." The insight struck Naruto as profoundly true, not merely regarding his personal situation but touching on broader themes that had defined his life's journey. From childhood, he had connected seemingly irreconcilable elements, human and Biju, enemy villages with historical enmity, shinobi and civilians, always serving as bridge between disparate perspectives. "Thanks," he said simply, knowing she would understand the depth behind his understated gratitude. They remained in comfortable silence as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley floor, both contemplating implications of the morning's breakthrough. When Naruto finally felt strong enough to walk, they returned Tawa. Rode the estate with uncharacteristic slowness, neither apparently eager to conclude their conversation. "Will you continue your research after I'm gone?" Naruto asked as they crested the final hill overlooking the mansion. "Of course," Irene replied with faint surprise at the question. "Dimensional theory remains insufficiently developed in current magical academia. Today's experiments alone provide foundation for several significant advancements." "Just the research?" Naruto pressed gently. "Or will you continue engaging with others rather than returning to isolation?" Irene's step faltered almost imperceptibly, the only indication that his question had struck something meaningful. "My preferences regarding social interaction remain unchanged. Research partners of sufficient capability are simply rare. So am I being replaced, or will there just be a vacancy?" Naruto asked with gentle humor, recognizing her deflection. "You are not being replaced," Irene replied with unexpected sharpness. "Your situation is unique, as is your particular combination of abilities and perspective. The concept of replacement suggests interchangeable parts rather than individual significance." The admission, for that's what it was beneath the formal language, surprised him into momentary silence. When he responded, he matched her honesty with his own. "I'll miss our conversations," he said simply. "Finding someone who understands transformation from the inside, that doesn't happen twice in a lifetime, even one as strange as mine." Irene didn't look at him directly, but something in her posture softened marginally. 3 days is sufficient time to complete additional experimental protocols. Your dimensional signature should be documented properly before transition attempts. It wasn't an emotional acknowledgement. But from Irene, the practical commitment to maximizing their remaining time together carried its own significance. Naruto accepted it with a slight nod, understanding what remained unspoken between them. As the mansion's lights appeared before them, golden against the gathering twilight, Naruto found himself appreciating these final days in Earthland with unexpected poignancy. Whatever came next, reunion, explanation, readjustment, these shared experiences of understanding would remain uniquely valuable. The transformed existing between worlds. Perhaps that wasn't merely description but purpose, to bridge perspectives otherwise separated by more than dimensional boundaries. If so, his journey here carried meaning beyond accidental displacement, becoming add an essential chapter in his continuing story. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Queen's Gambit. Crimson hair ablaze under the rising sun, Urza Scarlet stood atop Fiore's northeastern cliffs, armored fingers gripping the mission scroll so tightly that the parchment threatened to tear. 3 days of grueling travel had brought Fairy Tales Titania to this remote vantage point overlooking turbulent seas. The view failed to soothe her mounting unease. The Council's urgent summons had been uncharacteristically vague: unusual magical disturbances, dimensional anomalies, and a potential security threat requiring her specific expertise. Potential security threat, she murmured, scanning the missive one final time. Proceed with extreme caution when engaging the unknown entity. Beneath these road warnings lay a detail that explained her selection for this assignment, a detail that had kept her awake during the journey, mind racing with unwelcome possibilities. Confirmed involvement of S-class magical criminal Irene Belsarian, known associate of Zirf and former Spriggan 12 member. Irene Belsarian, the Dragon Queen, her mother, the woman who had abandoned her before birth, only to appear during the Alvarez War with devastating power and unfathomable cruelty. Their last encounter had ended with neither reconciliation nor closure, merely Irene's unexpected departure after Urza had refused to kill her despite their bitter confrontation. Now, apparently, Irene had involved herself with some interdimensional entity powerful enough to warrant council intervention. The coincidence seemed improbable at best, suspicious at worst. Securing the scroll within her enchanted armor, Urza re-equipped into her flight armor, cheetah patterned for enhanced speed rather than defense. According to the intelligence briefing, the anomaly had been detected approximately 30 kilometers inland, near the former Hartfilia estate now operating as a council research facility. The journey took less than an hour, her enhanced speed allowing her to traverse forested hills and rocky outcroppings with graceful efficiency. As she approached her destination, Urza slowed, magical senses expanding to catalog her surroundings. The environment felt different. Subtle energy fluctuations permeated the air, not hostile exactly, but fundamentally unfamiliar. The ether nano concentrations displayed patterns she'd never encountered, flowing in spiral configurations rather than the natural currents typical of Earthland's magical atmosphere. Switching to her standard Heart Cruise armor for balanced combat capability, Urza approached the estate perimeter with professional caution. The council guards stationed at the main gate recognized her immediately, their postures straightening as she approached. Titania, the senior guard acknowledged with a respectful nod. We were informed of your arrival. Councillor Belno left instructions for your immediate clearance. Has the situation changed since the initial report? Urza inquired, scanning the expansive grounds beyond the gate. No hostile incidents, the guard reported. The entity appears cooperative, though its capabilities remain concerning. Regular energy spikes have been detected from the eastern training grounds, consistent with high-level magical experimentation. And Irene Belsarian, the guard's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Present and actively involved in the research. The council maintains observation protocols but has authorized her continued participation under specific restrictions. Interesting. The council rarely demonstrated such tolerance toward known criminals, particularly those with Irene's destructive history. Whatever this dimensional anomaly represented, it had sufficient RTANCE to override standard security protocols. I'll proceed directly to the main facility, Urza decided. Please inform Councillor Belno's representative of my arrival. The estate's central manse loomed ahead, a sprawling structure of classical architecture now repurposed for magical research. As Urza approached, her enhanced senses detected 2 significant magical signatures within, one blazingly powerful yet unfamiliar. Combining elements reminiscent of Dragon Slayer magic with something entirely foreign, the other unmistakably Irene's, complex layers of enchantment magic cocooning a core of ancient draconic energy. Rather than announcing herself immediately, Urza circled toward a side entrance, professional instincts suggesting observation before confrontation. A partially open Endau provided both visual and auditory access to what appeared to be an extensive library, voices carrying clearly in the morning stillness. The resonance patterns suggest successful connection. CA. Me Irene's voice, clinical and precise as always. Your associates appear to have triangulated our dimensional coordinates using yesterday's viewing window as reference. Hinata's Byakugan can perceive across dimensional barriers. Replied a male voice Urza didn't recognize, warm and surprisingly gentle given the power she sensed from him. Combined with Shikamaru's calculations and Tsunade's expertise, they'll find a way through. Yet physical transit presents fundamentally different challenges than observational connection, Irene countered. The energy requirements increase exponentially, and biological matter responds unpredictably to dimensional transition without proper stabilization frameworks. They know the risks, the male voice insisted, and they're not exactly amateurs when it comes to impossible situations. Urza shifted position, gaining visual confirmation through the window's narrow opening. Inside the library, Irene stood beside a three-dimensional magical projection displaying complex energy patterns. Her scarlet hair, so similar to Urza's own, was arranged in its customary elaborate style, her posture remaining regal despite the early hour. Beside her stood a young man Urza didn't recognize, tall and athletically built with distinctive blonde hair containing unusual golden highlights. His features were striking, whisker-like markings adorned his cheeks, and his eyes occasionally flashed from blue to gold when he turned certain angles. Though dressed in simple training attire, he moved with the unconscious grace of a veteran warrior, every gesture sting-controlled power beneath casual demeanor. Most surprising was Irene's behavior toward him, not the cold disdain she typically displayed toward others, but something approaching professional respect. She actually seemed to be listening to his observations, occasionally nodding agreement as they manipulated the projected energy patterns together. Your dimensional signature stabilized remarkably well, Irene was saying, adjusting a particular configuration within the display. The draconic aspects provide structural integrity that pure chakra might lack during transit. That's what worries me, the young man replied, expression growing serious. My friends don't have that stability advantage. If they attempt transition without proper anchoring, then we must provide that anchoring, Irene concluded. Your transformed state creates natural dimensional resonance. If properly focused during their transition attempt, it could establish sufficient stability for safe passage. Conversation confirmed Urza's initial intelligence assessment. This stranger was indeed the dimensional anomaly, apparently human in appearance though housing something draconic within. More surprise. Was the apparent cooperation between him and Irene, suggesting alliance rather than coercion or manipulation. Deciding direct approach would yield better information than continued eavesdropping. Urza stepped away from the window and proceeded to the main entrance. The facility administrator, a nervous-looking woman with wire-framed glasses, greeted her with obvious relief. Titania, thank goodness you've arrived. I'm Meredith, the administrative liaison for this facility. Counselor Belno informed us of your assignment. If you'll follow me, I'll announce you to our guests. That won't be necessary, Urza replied. I'll introduce myself directly. Without waiting for response, she strode purposefully toward the library, magical energy coalescing around her in subtle preparation for potential conflict. The administrator hurried after her, protests dying unspoken as Urza pushed open the ornate double doors. Both occupants turned immediately, Irene with raised eyebrow suggesting he'd sensed Urza's approach long before her entrance, the blonde stranger with alert curiosity rather than alarm. Neither adopted defensive postures, though Urza noted how the young man subtly positioned himself to move quickly if necessary. Urza scarlet, Irene acknowledged, voice neutral. The council demonstrates increasing paranoia by sending you. Mother, Urza replied with matching coldness. Then shifted her attention to the stranger. And you must be the dimensional anomaly I've been dispatched to investigate. The young man smiled, a surprisingly warm expression that reached his eyes. Naruto Uzumaki, he introduced himself with a slight bow that suggested foreign cultural conditioning. Though, dimensional anomaly, sounds more impressive, I'll admit. Urza maintained professional detachment despite his disarming manner. The Magic Council reports unusual energy signatures and potential security concerns surrounding your arrival. I've been tasked with assessing the situation directly. An unnecessary precaution, Irene interjected smoothly. The Council has already conducted extensive examinations and established monitoring protocols. Your presence adds nothing but bureaucratic redundancy. Yet here I am, Urza countered, meeting her mother's gaze directly. Perhaps the Council considers independent verification prudent when known criminal elements become involved with interdimensional entities. Tension crackled between them, the unresolved complexity of their relationship adding dangerous depth to what might otherwise have been standard procedural disagreement. Before Irene could respond with what would undoubtedly have been cutting precision, Naruto stepped forward, his posture open and non-threatening despite the power Urza sensed beneath his casual demeanor. I understand the Council's caution, he said, voice carrying neither defensiveness nor irritation. In my world, we'd respond similarly to unexpected visitors with unknown abilities. I'm happy to answer your questions, Urza. Complete transparency benefits everyone here. The reasonable response, contrasting sharply with Irene's dismissive attitude, momentarily disrupted Urza's prepared approach. She'd anticipated resistance or manipulation, not straightforward cooperation. Very well, she said after a moment's consideration. Perhaps we should begin with your origins and the circumstances of your arrival in our world. Quote, what followed was a detailed explanation that Urza might have dismissed as fantasy had she not witnessed far stranger things during her career with Fairy Tail. Naruto described his home dimension, a world of shinobi with powers derived from internal energy called chakra rather than Earthland's external ethernano. He explained the transformation scroll, the Otsutsuki threat, and the accidental dimensional displacement that had brought him to Fury in draconic form. Throughout his account, Urza observed him with professional assessment, noting inconsistencies or indicators of deception. She found none. Either Naruto Uzumaki was telling the unvarnished truth, or he was the most accomplished liar she had ever encountered, and her experience included fact. Jalal's deceptions and council political maneuvering. And my mother's involvement, Urza asked when he finished describing his initial transformation difficulties. She found me shortly after arrival, Naruto explained. I couldn't control my dragon form properly, couldn't even speak at first. She recognized what had happened and helped me stabilize the transformation. Without her knowledge, I might have remained trapped in that state indefinitely. Altruistic intervention seems uncharacteristic, Urza observed coolly, gaze shifting to Irene. Pragmatic research opportunity, Irene corrected, though something in her tone suggested defensive justification beneath the clinical explanation. His transformation presents unique magical principles worth studying. The Council recognized this value. Hence their unusual tolerance of my continued involvement. Urza doubted the explanation captured Irene's full motivation, but pursuing that line would accomplish little beyond escalating tensions. Instead, she refocused on the immediate security concerns. Yesterday's energy spike registered across multiple Council monitoring stations, she noted. What exactly were you attempting? Naruto and Irene exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passing between them before Naruto responded. Dimensional viewing, he explained. We established temporary connection with my home world, visual only. No physical transit. My friends have been searching for me, and we confirmed they've located this dimension. They're attempting to establish proper transit protocols within the next 3 days. This information represented significant escalation beyond Urza's briefing parameters. You're saying additional entities from your dimension may arrive imminently. Not entities, friends, Naruto corrected firmly. Allies who've been trying to help me return home. They pose no threat to Earthland. You can't guarantee that, Urza countered. Dimensional transit affects different energy systems unpredictably. Your own transformation demonstrates the potential consequences. Which is precisely why we're establishing proper stabilization protocols, Irene interjected. Unlike Naruto's accidental arrival, this transition will be controlled and monitored. The Council has been informed of developments through regular reports. Urza considered this information carefully, weighing security protocols against practical reality. The situation presented genuine complexity, neither dismissing potential threats nor overreacting would serve Fiore's interests. I'll need to verify these reports directly with Counselor Belno, she decided. Until then, all experimental activities will be conducted with my direct observation. The Council assigned this investigation to me, and I intend to fulfill that responsibility thoroughly. She expected resistance from Irene, whose tolerance for oversight had proven non-existent in previous encounters. Instead, her mother merely shrugged elegantly. Your presence changes nothing substantive. Today's schedule includes stabilization framework development and energy calibration exercises. You're welcome to observe provided you don't interfere with the work itself. The civility, however thin, represented unprecedented restraint from the Dragon Queen. Urza found herself momentarily disoriented by this unexpected reasonableness. Her prepared confrontational responses suddenly inappropriate. That's acceptable, she managed, maintaining professional composure despite her surprise. When do you plan to begin? After breakfast, Naruto interjected with casual practicality. Dimensional magic on an empty stomach seems like asking for trouble. The ordinary concern, so human and mundane amid discussions of world-altering magical theory, struck Urza as incongruously amusing. Despite herself, her lips twitched slightly before she mastered her expression. Sensible precaution, she acknowledged. I'll use the intervenin. Time to review existing documentation and establish communication with my council liaison. As if summoned by mention of meals, the facility administrator reappeared, nervously announcing breakfast availability in the main dining hall. The three departed the library together, maintaining polite distance that did nothing to diminish the crackling undercurrents between them. Urza found herself tutoring Naruto as they walked, his relaxed yet alert posture suggesting battlefield experience, his occasional glances toward windows and exits marking unconscious tactical awareness. Despite his apparently open demeanor, she recognized the indicators of a seasoned warrior, someone accustomed to constant threat assessment while maintaining outward casualness. Most intriguing was his behavior toward Irene, respectful without subservience, comfortable without presumptuous familiarity. He treated the Dragon Queen neither with the fear her reputation typically inspired nor with the calculated manipu lashon attempts that usually characterized those seeking her power. Instead, their interaction suggested genuine mutual respect between equals, a dynamic Urza had never witnessed regarding her mother. Breakfast proceeded with superficial civility overlaying complex tensions. Urza maintained professional detachment while gathering information through observation. Naruto ate with impressive enthusiasm, his transformed physiology apparently requiring substantial caloric intake. Irene barely touched her food, sipping tea with aristocratic precision while reviewing magical formulas on floating lacrima displays. The dimensional frequency oscillations require precise calibration, she observed, manipulating a particular equation sequence. Yesterday's viewing window established baseline resonance parameters, but physical transit demands significantly greater stability margins. We could anchor the transition point using my full dragon form, Naruto suggested between mouthfuls. The Draken, IC energy creates natural dimensional resonance that might help stabilize their arrival. Potentially effective, though experimental, Irene agreed, surprising Urza with her willingness to consider another's suggestion. Your transformed state does generate harmonic frequencies corresponding to dimensional boundary layers. You're suggesting deliberately manifesting this dragon form at their arrival point, Urza interjected, professional concern overriding her observational stance. The magical discharge could attract attention beyond council monitoring, perhaps even from entities we'd pref. Remained unaware of dimensional vulnerabilities. Naruto turned toward her, blue eyes momentarily flashing gold, not threatening but indicating accessed power beneath his human appearance. You mean Zeref's remaining followers? Or something else? Urza hesitated, security protocols warring with practical necessity. These strangers, dimensional traveler and estranged mother alike, deserved partia. Truth if she expected their cooperation. The council has detected anomalous energy signatures across Fury in recent weeks, she admitted finally. 17 confirmed incidents of dimensional thinning. Though no actual breaches beyond your initial arrival, something appears to be testing the barriers between worlds. Naruto and Irene exchanged significant glances, some unspoken understanding passing between them. It was Irene who verbalized their apparent concern. You believe these anomalies connect to Naruto's world rather than representing random fluctuations. Unknown, Urza acknowledged, but the timing suggests correlation if not causation. The first anomaly was detected approximately 3 days after your arrival, with increasing frequencies since then. The Otsutsuki, Naruto said grimly. previous good humor vanishing beneath grave concern. If they obtained another transformation scroll or developed alternative dimensional techniques. Speculation without evidence, Irene cautioned. Though her expression suggested she took the possibility seriously. However, prudent security measures would account for potential hostile interest in these transition events. Urza nodded agreement, momentarily aligned with her mother despite their fundamental differences. The Council maintains containment protocols for extraplanar incursions, but implementation requires advanced preparation. Then we should examine these anomaly sites, Naruto decided with the casual authority of someone accustomed to command decisions. If they're connected to my world, I might recognize energy signatures or patterns your people would miss. The Council hasn't authorized external involvement in anomaly investigation, Urza countered automatically, though she recognized the practical value in his suggestion. Then perhaps the Council requires updated information regarding interdimensional threat assessment capabilities, Irene observed with characteristic dismissiveness toward bureaucratic restrictions. Naruto's sensory abilities regarding these particular energy signatures far exceed standard detection methods. Finding herself outnumbered by surprisingly reasonable arguments, Urza considered her options. Direct defiance of Council protocols would damage her professional standing, yet rigid adherence might sacrifice valuable intelligence if Naruto's capabilities proved as significant as claimed. I'll consult with Counselor Belno regarding limited involvement in specific anomaly sites, she decided finally. Until then, we proceed with the scheduled stabilization experiments under controlled conditions. This compromise appeared acceptable to both Naruto and Irene, neither pressing for immediate action despite their evident concern. After breakfast concluded, they departed for the eastern training grounds, an extensive open area surrounded by natural stone formations that provided both privacy and containment for magical experimentation. The morning air carried autumn crispness, leaves beginning their transition toward golden red hues that complemented Urza's hair as she strode across the expansive grounds. She maintained professional distance behind Naruto and Irene, observing their interaction with analytical attention. Your daughter's exactly as you described her, Naruto commented quietly to Irene, apparently unaware of Urza's enhanced hearing capabilities. Strong, disciplined, and absolutely unwilling to compromise her principles. I described no such thing, Irene replied coolly. My assessment of Urza Scarlet remains irrelevant to our current work. Right, Naruto responded with obvious disbelief. That's why you mentioned her tactical approach to problem solving, her exceptional requip magic capabilities, and her street-aborness when facing overwhelming odds. Contextual examples regarding magical theory application, Irene dismissed, though something in her tone suggested defensive justification. Nothing more. Urza nearly missed a step, the casual exchange revealing more about Irene's awareness of her life than she'd ever suspected. Had her mother been monitoring her career from a distance? The possibility. Why added uncomfortable complexity to her already conflicted feelings regarding the Dragon Queen? The training ground itself presented impressive magical infrastructure, concentric circles of lacrima bedded stones creating a stable experimental environment capable of containing significant energy discharges. At the formation's center stood an elevated platform inscribed with complex arcane symbols that Urza recognized as dimensional stability anchors, high-level magical theory typically restricted to Council research divisions. Standard observation position is there, Naruto indicated, pointing toward a reinforced shelter at the formation's edge. Safety protocols and all that. Irene insisted on proper containment after I accidentally vaporized a mountain outcropping during early practice sessions. Prudent precaution, Urza acknowledged, though she had no intention of removing herself from immediate vicinity regardless of safety concerns. I prefer direct observation distance. Naruto shrugged good-naturedly. Your call. Just be prepared for some pretty intense energy discharge during the transformation sequence. It can be a bit overwhelming the first time you see it. I've witnessed dragon slayers at full power, including Acnologia's manifestation, Urza reminded him with professional confidence. I doubt your transformation exceeds those parameters. Something like Cement flickered across Irene's features. Your assessment may require adjustment, daughter. Standard Dragon Slayer manifestations bear little resemblance to true draconic transformation. Before Urza could respond to this unexpected challenge, Naruto stepped toward the platform's center, rolling his shoulders with casual preparation. Let's start with partial manifestation first, easier to control the energy discharge that way. Ready when you are, Irene. The Dragon Queen nodded, staff materializing in her hand as she activated the surrounding magical array with practiced precision. Energy hummed through the concentric circles, lacrima illuminating in sequence as power built within the containment field. Manifest wings and sensory enhancements only, Irene instructed. We'll establish baseline resonance patterns before attempting full transformation. Naruto nodded, centering himself with a fighter's practiced focus. Golden light shimmered across his form, not enveloping him completely but concentrating around specific areas. His back bulged beneath his training shirt, fabric straining before tearing away as magnificent wings erupted from his shoulder blades, golden scaled endages spanning nearly 15 feet at full extension. Simultaneously, his facial features shifted subtly, eyes transforming completely to draconic gold with vertical pupils, whisker markings on his cheeks deepening and gaining definition, and barely visible scales manifesting along his jawline and temples. The transformation appeared controlled and precise rather than wild or involuntary. Urza maintained professional composure despite genuine surprise at the partial dragon manifestation. She had encountered numerous magical transformations throughout her career, but this displayed unusual integration. Neither complete metamorphosis nor temporary overlay but seamless incorporation of draconic elements within predominantly human form. Dimensional resonance established at 30% baseline, Irene reported. Monitoring floating magical displays with analytical precision. Structural integrity maintains optimal parameters without interference patterns. Sensory range expanded significantly, Naruto reported. Golden eyes scanning their surroundings with predator focus. I can detect Ethernon currents throughout the entire estate property, plus something else. He turned sharply eastward, wings adjusting position with unconscious grace as his attention fixed on something beyond normal perception range. There's an anomaly approximately 12 kilometers northeast, Semal. AR energy signature to the dimensional window we established yesterday, but unstable. Fluctuating rather than sustained. Urza stepped forward, professional interest overriding observational stance. You can sense an anomaly from this distance. The Council's detection equipment requires much closer proximity. Dragon senses, Naruto explained without breaking his focused concentration. Combined with chakra sensory capabilities. It's faint but distinctive, like hearing a specific instrument in a distant orchestra. Irene abandoned her monitoring equipment, moving to stand beside him with sudden intensity. Describe the fluctuation pattern precisely. Rhythmic pulses, increasing in frequency, Naruto reported, expression growing concerned. 3-second intervals initially, now accelerating toward continuous emission. The dimensional barrier feels thinner there, stretched like fabric about to tear. That matches Council reports of imminent breach conditions, Urza confirmed, P. Professional alarm engaging as she processed implications. Standard protocol requires containment team deployment, but the nearest unit is stationed in Crocus, at least 40 minutes away even with magical transportation. We don't have 40 minutes, Naruto stated with certainty. Whatever's happening there is accelerating. The dimensional frequency is approaching critical resonance. Decision crystallized in Urza's mind. Protocol versus practical necessity clarifying into obvious choice. Then we investigate immediately. I'll take responsibility with the Council. Efficient transportation becomes priority, Irene observed. Already deactivating the experimental array with practiced efficiency. Standard teleportation requires precise destination coordinates we lack for this anomaly. I can guide us there. Naruto countered, wings flexing with unconscious readiness. My sensory abilities can track the energy signature directly if we get within general vicinity. Then I'll establish general area transportation. Irene decided, approximately 10 kilometers northeast, followed by aerial approach to precise coordinates. Urza nodded agreement, momentarily setting aside person. All conflicts in favor of operational necessity. I'll contact Council Containment Division to advise of our approach. They can deploy backup resources if our assessment confirms breach conditions. Within minutes they had organized impromptu response measures. Irene established a transportation circle designed for group transit, its parameters deliberately broadened to accommodate approximate rather than precise targeting. Urza contacted her council liaison through communication lacrima, providing situation assessment and approach details with professional efficiency. Ready, Irene announced, completing the transportation array's final configurations. This will position us approximately 2 kilometers from the estimated anomaly location based on topographical references. Disorientation is normal during imprecise dimensional shifting. They stepped into the glowing circle together, Urza maintaining professional distance while Naruto and Irene positioned themselves with the Unconscio. As coordination of those accustomed to working together. Magic flared around them, reality compressing momentarily before snapping back into focus at their destination. Forest surrounded them, ancient trees stretching skyward, undergrowth thick with late summer vegetation. Morning sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the ground with shifting patterns as gentle breeze stirred overhead branches. Under different circumstances, the setting might have appeared tranquil. The magical atmosphere conveyed anything but tranquility. Even without enhanced senses, Urza detected wrongness permeate in their surroundings. Ethernano currents disrupted from natural patterns, ambient magical pressure fluctuating in irregular pulses that set her teeth on edge. Northeast, approximately 1.8 kilometers, Naruto reported immediately. Golden eyes narrowing as he oriented toward the disturbance. The resonance frequency has stabilized temporarily, but energy continues building behind the dimensional barrier. Aerial approach provides tactical advantage, Irene decided, magic swirling around her form as she prepared levitation enchantment. Agreed. Naruto extended his golden wings fully, power. Full muscles tensing beneath his torn shirt. Urza, can you? Flight armor, she confirmed, magical energy enveloping her as she re-equipped into the cheetah-patterned ensemble that provided enhanced speed and limited aerial capability. I'll approach from western vector while you take direct path. Standard containment formation. They moved with professional efficiency that belied their brief acquaintance. Naruto launching skyward with powerful wing strokes, Irene rising on crimson magical energy, and Urza employing her armor's enhanced jumping capability to traverse the forest canopy in bounding leaps. As they approached the anomaly site, environmental disruption increased dramatically. Vegetation displayed unnatural growth patterns, trees twisted into impossible configurations, flowers blooming out of season in vibrant colors that seemed somehow wrong, fungi structures forming complex geometric patterns that pulsed with sickly luminescence. More concerning were the animals they encountered, forest creatures displaying physical modifications that defied natural explanation. A deer crashed through undergrowth beneath them, antlers crystallized into structures resembling miniature tree branches complete with leaves. Birds circled overhead with too many wings arranged in mathematically perfect symmetry, their calls distorted into harmonic overtones that hurt human ears. Ether. Nano-contamination doesn't produce these effects, Urza observed as they paused at the anomaly perimeter, assessing before final approach. This resembles reality manipulation rather than simple magical pollution. Not Ethernano. Naruto confirmed grimly. Chakra. These organisms have been exposed to unfiltered chakra from my dimension, energy their biological systems aren't designed to process. Fascinating, Irene murmured, examining a nearby flower whose petals continuously reconfigured themselves into different geometric patterns. The foreign energy catalyzes evolutionary acceleration without complete biological breakdown. Adaptation rather than destruction. Save the research observations for later, Urza advised tersely. The anomaly center should be approximately 200 meters ahead. Standard containment approach suggests magical suppression field deployment before direct engagement. No time, Naruto countered, golden eyes fixed on something beyond the dense vegetation. The dimensional barrier is reaching critical instability. Something's coming through. He launched forward without waiting for agreement, wings propelling him above the forest canopy toward a clearing barely visible through the dense foliage. Urza followed immediately, professional instincts overriding irritation at the uncoordinated advance. Irene matched their pace, scarlet energy swirling around her form as she prepared combat enchantments. The clearing itself defied natural formation, a perfect circle approximately 50 meters in diameter where vegetation had been flattened outward as though from explosive force. At its center hung what could only be described as a tear in reality, a jagged vertical rent in the air itself, edges pulsing with coruscating energy that shifted between azure blue and sickly white. The opening widened visibly as they approached, dimensional barriers stretching thinner with each passing second. Containment priority, Urza called, reequipping instantly into her adamantine armor, defensive plates materializing around her form as she prepared maximum barrier deployment. Suppress the energy discharge while I establish perimeter shields. Naruto landed directly before the dimensional tear, golden wings flaring wide as he channeled unfamiliar energy through his partially transformed body. I recognize this signature, it's definitely from my world, but distorted somehow. Corrupted. Before further analysis could proceed, the tear widened dramatically, reality parting with visible resistance as something pushed through from the other side. Air filled with discordant screeching as dimensional frequencies collided, magical pressure building to near painful levels around them. White hands emerged first, unnaturally elongated fingers grasping the tear's edges to force wider opening. The creature that followed defied easy classification, humanoid yet wrong in fundamental proportions, its body chalk white and seemingly boneless despite maintaining bipedal structure. Most disturbing was its face, featureless save for a single vertical eye that swiveled independently from its head's orientation. Otsutsuki construct, Naruto identified immediately. Golden energy gathering around his form as he shifted to combat stance. Not a true member of their clan but an artificial servant designed for interdimensional reconnaissance. The construct fully emerged, body undulating with disturbing fluidity as it oriented itself within Earthland's environment. Its single eye fixed upon Naruto with immediate recognition, vertical pupil contracting sharply. Before anyone could react, it emitted high-frequency sonic vibration, not quite sound but something adjacent to it that disrupted concentration and magical focus. Urza staggered momentarily, adamantine armor providing partial protection against the disorienting effect. Irene countered more effectively, crimson barrier flaring around her as enchantment magic neutralized the disruption field. Naruto appeared entirely unaffected, golden eyes narrowing as he launched forward with devastating speed. His attack pattern demonstrated trained combat expertise, not wild aggression but precisely targeted strikes against apparent vulnerabilities. His right hand transformed mid-motion, human fingers elongating into golden claws that sheared through the construct's shoulder junction with surgical precision. White fluid sprayed from the wound, hissing where it contacted natural vegetation. The construct recoiled with unexpected agility, damaged limb regenerating even as it retreated toward the dimensional tier. Its purpose became immediately apparent, not combat but information gathering, using the established breach as bidirectional communication channel. Don't let it report back, Naruto shouted, wings propelling him forward in pursuit. If they confirm my location, they'll send something much worse. Urza responded instantly, reequipping into flight armor for maximum speed, as she circled to cut off the construct's retreat path. Simultaneously, Irene unleashed precisely calibrated enchantment, crimson energy enveloping the dimensional tier itself, stabilizing its fluctuating edges to prevent immediate expansion. Caught between coordinated attackers, the construct demonstrated unexpected adaptive intelligence. Rather than continuing its retreat, it plunged boneless fingers directly into the soil, channeling foreign energy into Earthland's natural systems. The ground erupted beneath them, not simple seismic disruption but fundamental molecular reconfiguration as transformed into animated matter responding to the construct's control. Misshapen forms rose from churning soil, approximations of woodland creatures constructed from earth and vegetation, their foe. RMS twisted by the construct's imperfect understanding of Earthland biology. These guardians immediately engaged the three attackers, buying time for their creators' continued activities. Urza cleave D through three earth constructs with a single sword sweep, reequipping seamlessly into Heaven's Wheel armor to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Steel flashed in morning sunlight as her Circle O.F. swords decimated the nearest wave of animated matter. Despite their fragility, the constructs continued emerging in concerning numbers, each drawing magical energy from the environment to maintain coherence. Meanwhile, Irene maintained focus on the dimensional tier itself, crimson enchantment preventing further expansion while simultaneously analyzing its fundamental properties. The breach structure suggests deliberate engineering rather than natural formation, she called, voice carrying easily despite the chaotic battlefield. Someone on the other side created this intentionally. The Otsutsuki never act without purpose. Naruto confirmed, golden claws shredding through animated guardians as he fought toward the primary construct. This is reconnaissance, testing defenses and gathering information before committing significant resources. Understanding crystallized in Urza's tactical assessment. They faced advanced elements of potential invasion force rather than random dimensional phenomenon. Priority shifted immediately from simple containment to intelligence denial and breach closure. We need to sever the connection completely, she called, synchronizing her attack pattern with Naruto's advance. Destroy the primary construct and collapse the breach simultaneously. Synchronize on my mark, Irene responded, crimson energy intensifying around her staff as she prepared modified enchantment. I'll destabilize the breach structure while you eliminate the controller. Naruto nodded understanding, golden wings folding tight against his back as he prepared explosive acceleration. Urza positioned herself opposite him, creating pincer attack configuration against the primary target. 3. Irene began, magical energy coalescing into precise formation around the dimensional tier. 2. 1. Mark. They moved with perfect coordination, Naruto launching forward in golden blur while Urza struck from opposite vector, her purgatory armor manifesting mid-charge to deliver maximum destructive impact. Simultaneously, Irene's enchantment inverted the dimensional tear's stability parameters, converting its expansion energy into accelerated collapse. The white const. Ruck detected their synchronized attack too late for effective countermeasures. Naruto's claws struck its central mass precisely as Urza's massive blade impacted from behind, their combined force shray. DDING its physical cohesion beyond regenerative capability. White matter exploded outward, momentarily suspended in glittering particles before dissolving into inert dust. With its controlling influence severed, the animated guardians collapsed immediately, returning to natural earth and vegetation as foreign energy dissipated from their composition. More significantly, the dimensional tear contracted violently, edges sealing with visual resistance as Irene's enchantment forced unnatural closure. Breach contained, Urza reported professionally, reequipping back to standard armor as immediate threat subsided. Perimeter secure. Temporarily, Irene corrected, studying residual energy patterns with analytical precision. The dimensional barrier remains weakened at this location. Without proper reinforcement, secondary breach becomes possible within approximately 72 hours. Naruto knelt beside the dissolved construct remains, golden eyes narrowed as he examined the faintly glowing dust. This isn't over, he said quietly. That thing transmitted something before we destroyed it, basic confirmation of dimensional coordinates at minimum. They know where I am now. You believe additional incursions are likely? Urza asked, professional assessment overriding the combat adrenaline still coursing through her system. Certain, Naruto confirmed grimly. The Otsutsuki don't abandon objectives once identified. If they want the transformation scroll's power badly enough to send dimensional scouts, then proper preparation becomes immediate priority, Irene concluded. This site requires permanent monitoring and reinforcement against secondary breach attempts. Urza nodded agreement, momentarily aligned with her mother despite their fundamental differences. I'll contact Council Containment Division to establish permanent warding. They maintain specialized equipment for dimensional breach sites. Insufficient, Irene dismissed with characteristic directness. Standard Council protocols address random dimensional phenomena, not deliberate incursion attempts by intelligent entities. This situation requires customized countermeasures. Rather than reflexively defending Council procedures, Urza found herself considering Irene's assessment with professional objectivity. Their synchronized response had neutralized the immediate threat effectively, suggesting complementary capabilities despite personal conflicts. What would you propose instead? She asked, surprising herself with genuine inquiry rather than confrontational challenge. Something like a P-proval flickered across Irene's features before her customary mask reasserted itself. A combined approach utilizing Naruto's knowledge of the potential invaders, my enchantment expertise regarding dimensional boundaries, and Council resources for implementation. Sensible compromise, Urza acknowledged. I'll request expanded authorization from Councillor Belno to incorporate your recommendations into official response protocols. As they secured the breach site for Council examination, Urza found herself reassessing her initial mission parameters. She had arrived expecting to investigate an isolated anomaly. possibly neutralizing her mother's manipulations of an interdimensional visitor. Instead, she found herself facing potential interdimensional conflict requiring unprecedented cooperation. More personally disturbing was her efficient combat synchronization with both Naruto and Irene, their attack patterns complementing each other with unexpected harmony despite minimal prior coordination. Something about Naruto's fighting style bridged the gap between Urza's disciplined precision and Irene's devastating magical approach, creating temporary battle harmony that had proven remarkably effective. "Your combat capabilities exceed standard parameters," she observed as they prepared for return transportation to the research facility. That wasn't merely enhanced physical ability but trained combat expertise. Naruto's wings retracted smoothly into his back, golden scales receding as he returned to predominantly human appearance. Only his eyes retained draconic characteristics, vertical pupils contracting against morning sunlight. "I was a shinobi before becoming whatever I am now," he explained with simple directness. "Combat training started when I was 6 years old, active field operations by 12. My world doesn't exactly promote peaceful childhood development. Similar to certain magical academies here," Urza noted, thinking of her own traumatic formative experiences. Though typically without such early field deployment. "Different worlds, similar patterns," Naruto observed with surprising insight. "People with power deciding how others should use theirs, usually with more concern for results than individual well-being." The observation struck uncomfortably close to Urza's own unspoken criticisms of both council policies and guild politics. Before Rishi could formulate appropriate response, Irene completed their return transportation circle, crimson energy flowing into precise configuration. "This breach confirms interdimensional interest beyond your accidental arrival," she noted. Addressing Naruto directly, "The Council's containment resources will require supplementation with specialized countermeasures. Meaning we need to accelerate our research," Naruto agreed. "If the Otsutsuki are actively searching dimensional boundaries, they'll eventually find the connection my friends are establishing. We need to secure that transit point before they can interfere. Which necessitates my continued involvement despite council reservations," Irene concluded with faint satisfaction. "Practical necessity overriding bureaucratic restriction, how convenient." Urza recognized the political maneuvering beneath her mother's apparent practicality. Yet she found herself unable to dismiss the underlying validity of their concerns. Standard council protocols hadn't anticipated intelligent interdimensional entities actively searching for specific targets. "I'll update my assessment report to include today's developments," she decided as they stepped into the transportation circle. Counselor Belno should receive complete information before making resource allocation decisions. Reality distorted briefly around them as Irene's magic activated. The forest clearing disappearing as research facility grounds materialized in its place. Morning had progressed toward noon during their absence, sunlight now striking the mansion's window at higher angle that sent prismatic reflections across manicured lawns. Council representatives had arrived during their absence, 4 uniformed officials and a contingent of Rune Knights established in temporary command center on the eastern grounds. At their center stood a familiar silver-haired figure whose presence indicated the situation's escalating priority. Counselor Belno, Urza Aknal, edged with appropriate deference as they approached. "Your presence suggests this situation has been reclassified beyond standard containment protocols." "Indeed, Titania," Belno confirmed, sharp gas. Moving between the three of them with analytical precision. 4 additional dimensional anomalies manifested simultaneously across Fury approximately 90 minutes ago. All displaying energy signatures consistent with your breach site. Quote, "Coordinated reconnaissance," Naruto identified immediately, concern evident in his expression. "They're triangulating dimensional coordinates from multiple access points." "So it would appear," Belno agreed, surprising Urza with her immediate acceptance of his assessment. "The Council has reclassified this from isolated anomaly to potential security THR. Requiring coordinated response measures." She turned toward Irene with visible reluctance that nevertheless yielded to practical necessity. "Your analytical assessment regarding these entities would be valuable to response planning. The Council authorizes temporary advisory status under Titania's supervision." Rather than displaying satisfaction at this official acknowledgement, Irene merely nodded with businesslike efficiency. "Logical decision given circumstances." The entities attempting dimensional breach demonstrate strategic coordination, suggesting intelligence rather than random phenomena. Standard containment protocols require adaptation. Precisely why I've established command center here rather than ERA, Belno confirmed. Immediate response capability outweighs centrally. Z control under current threat assessment parameters. She turned toward Naruto, assessing him with particular attention. Your insights regarding these entities would be similarly valuable, Uzumaki-san. The Council acknowledges your cooperative stance thus far and extends provisional authority to assist response coordination. The formal authorization, unexpected given typical Council resistance, CE to external involvement in security matters, demonstrated the situation's perceived severity. Belno would not have granted such latitude without significant concern regarding potential threats. Happy to help however I can, Naruto replied with characteristic directness. These Otsutsuki constructs represent advance elements rather than primary threat. If they establish stable dimensional access points, more powerful entities will follow. Then our priority becomes denying such access while securing your associate's arrival through controlled transit protocols, Belno concluded efficiently. Coordinated defense planning will commence immediately following detailed debriefing regarding your breach encounter. As they moved toward the temporary command center, Urza found herself in UNP. Recedented alignment with both Naruto and Irene despite their vastly different backgrounds and perspectives. The potential threat transcended personal conflicts and political considerations, creating temporary common purpose among otherwise disparate individuals. More surprisingly, she realized that her initial mission parameters had shifted fundamentally. Rather than investigating potential security concerns surrounding Naruto and Irene's research, she now found herself coordinating joint response measures that incorporated their specialized knowledge and capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on her, that her mother, whom she had fundamentally rejected during their previous encounters, now stood as necessary ally against interdimensional threat. More complex still were her evolving impressions of Naruto himself, his combat synchronization with both herself and Irene suggesting bridges between their otherwise incompatible approaches. As planning discussions commenced within the command center, one certainty emerged clearly in Urza's tactical assessment: standard operating procedures would prove insufficient against the developing situation. Unprecedented threats required equally unprecedented cooperation, even among those with complicated personal histories. The Queen's Gambit had begun, sacrificing conventional approaches to gain strategic advantage against opponents whose capabilities remained dangerously unknown. Whether this improvised alliance would prove sufficient against interdimensional adversaries remained uncertain, but alternatives seemed increasingly limited as dimensional boundaries continued weakening across Fury. Night descended over the research facility, stars emerging in brilliant clarity above the command center's temporary structures. Council person Nell moved with practiced efficiency between monitoring stations, maintaining vigilance against potential breach activities while implementing enhanced security protocols across identified vulnerability zones. Urza stood at the command center's perimeter, ostensibly monitoring southeastern approaches while actually processing the day's developments with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Professional Raining had prepared her for numerous threat scenarios, but interdimensional invasion coordinated by intelligent entities exceeded standard response parameters. More personally unsettling was her unexpected combat synchronization with both Naruto and Irene during the morning's breach encounter. Despite minimal prior coordination, their abilities had complemented each other with disturbing effectiveness, suggesting natural compatibility that contradicted her emotional distance from her mother. "You're thinking too loudly," came Naruto's voice from behind her, startling her from contemplation. "Sorry, enhanced senses make it hard to approach people without them noticing, but you seemed pretty deep in thought." Urza turned, maintaining professional composure despite her surprise at his silent approach. He had fully returned to human appearance, draconic features completely receded beneath ordinary exterior. Only occasional golden flecks in his blue eyes suggested the power contained within his seemingly normal form. "Situational assessment requires thorough consideration," she replied neutrally. "Today's developments suggest escalation beyond initial intelligence estimates." "True," Naruto acknowledged, moving to stand beside her with comfortable casualness that somehow avoided presumption. But that's not what has you standing alone in the dark looking like you're trying to sow. Elve world hunger through sheer concentration. The unexpectedly perceptive observation, delivered without judgment or demand, caught Urza momentarily off guard. Most people approaching fairy tales tit. Anya maintained respectful distance from her personal thoughts, intimidated by her formidable reputation. I'm unaccustomed to encountering situations where standard protocols prove fundamentally inadequate, she admitted after brief consideration. Particularly when adaptation requires cooperation with individuals I had previously categorized as problematic. You mean Irene, Naruto stated rather than asked, blue eyes reflecting starlight as he gazed toward the distant mountains. Mother-daughter relationships are complicated enough without centuries of dragon transformation and dimensional threats complicating things. Despite herself, Urza's lips quirked slightly at the dramatic understatement. A simplified assessment, but not inaccurate. I've found most complicated relations. Hips get clearer when there's something bigger threatening everyone, Naruto observed, leaning casually against the observation platform railing. Nothing like potential dimensional invasion to put personal conflicts in perspective. Pragmatic cooperation doesn't resolve fundamental differences, Urza countered, though without her usual firmness. Temporary alignment against common threat doesn't erase history. No, it doesn't, Naruto agreed readily. But it sometimes creates space to see people as they are now rather than only through history's lens. Irene today isn't exactly the same person who made decisions centuries ago. Just like you're not the same person you were as a child. The observation struck Urza as simultaneously obvious and profound, a simple truth she had intellectually recognized without emotionally integrating. People changed over time, sometimes fundamentally. Her own journey from traumatized slave child to confident guild wizard demonstrated this reality clearly. You speak from experience, she noted, studying him with renewed interest. My best friend tried to kill me. Multiple times, actually, Naruto explained with surprising casualness. We eventually worked through it. But it took years and some pretty dramatic circumstances to create enough space for new understanding. That seems unusually forgiving, Urza observed. Though memories of her own complicated history with Jello suggested she had little standing to criticize. Naruto shrugged, golden highlights shimmering briefly through his hair as he moved. Forgiveness isn't about seeing what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It's about deciding that potential future relationship matters more than staying anchored to past harm. The insight resonated uncomfortably with Za's unresolved feelings regarding both Jello and Irene. Different relationships with similar emotional complications. In both cases, genuine harm existed alongside potential connection, creating unresolved tension she typically addressed through determined avoidance rather than direct engagement. You're remarkably perceptive for someone who's been in this world less than a month, she noted, deflecting from uncomfortable self-reflection. Being trapped between worlds gives interesting perspective, Naruto replied thoughtfully. You see patterns more clearly when you're not fully embedded in either reality. Plus, he added with self-deprecating smile, I've had some practice navigating complicated relationships. My world wasn't exactly known for straightforward interpersonal dynamics. Their conversation paused as council messenger approached, delivering updated monitoring reports with professional efficiency before departing. Urza reviewed the information quickly, no new breach attempts detected. Though dimensional thinning continued at all previously identified anomaly sites. The Otsutsuki are being cautious, Naruto observed, reading over her shoulder with casual disregard for formal protocols. Gathering information before committing significant resources. Standard approach when exploring unknown territory. You seem familiar with their tactical methodology despite describing them as extraterrestrial threats, Urza noted, professional interest engaged by his apparent knowledge. Fought them before, Naruto explained simply. Different members, same overall approach. They consider themselves superior to all other species, interdimensional harvests rather than invaders in their own perception. They study potential resistance carefully before committing full resources. Which suggests our breach response provided valuable tactical information they'll incorporate into subsequent attempts, Urza concluded with professional concern. Our defensive capabilities have been partially revealed without corresponding intelligence regarding their full offensive options. Exactly, Naruto confirmed, expression growing more serious. Which means we need to accelerate preparations before they determine optimal approach vectors, including securing my friend's arrival through controlled dimensional transit. The practical assessment aligned with Urza's own tactical evaluation. Though council protocols typically favored containment over potentially destabilizing proactive measures. Before she could formulate appropriate response, movement at the command center entrance drew their attention. Irene emerged from the planning session, her expression revealing nothing of the discussions that had occupied senior council representatives for the past 3 hours. She moved toward them with characteristic grace, scarlet hair glowing almost supernaturally in the compound's magical lighting. The council has authorized accelerated dimensional stabilization research, she announced without preamble. Belno proved unexpectedly reasonable once presented with comprehensive threat assessment data. Meaning they're genuinely concerned about these breach attempts, Urza interpreted. Recognizing the significance of such rapid authorization through normally labyrinthine approval processes. Indeed, 4 simultaneous anomalies exceeded standard random distribution parameters by significant margins, Irene confirmed. Even bureaucrats recognize coordinated activity when presented with sufficient evidence. She turned toward Naruto, professional focus rep, lacing her usual dismissiveness regarding council matters. They've authorized supervised transit attempt for your associates, provided proper containment protocols remain in place. Apparently interdimensional allies with specialized knowledge suddenly appear valuable when facing potential hostile incursion. Practical self-interest transcending bureaucratic caution, Naruto observed with faint amusement. Some things really are universal across dimensions. When will these associates attempt transition? Urza asked, professional concern regarding uncontrolled variables overriding philosophical observations. Proper security measures require advanced preparation. Tomorrow, Naruto replied with certainty. Based on the viewing window connection and Hinata's message. The council's authorization comes just in time. They'll attempt transit whether we're ready or not. Then we prepare appropriate reception protocols immediately, Urza decided, momentarily setting aside complicated personal dynamics in favor of operational necessity. Councillor Belno should be informed of specific timing expectations to ensure proper resource allocation. Already addressed, Irene confirmed with uncharacteristic cooperation. Specialized containment teams will establish perimeter security by dawn, with central transit zone prepared according to our research specifications. The coordinated planning, implemented with minimal conflict despite their complicated interpersonal dynamics, demonstrated pragmatic adaptation to emergency conditions. Whatever their differences, all 3 recognized the situation's gravity sufficiently to prioritize effective response over personal considerations. As midnight approached, they finalized preparation details with professional efficiency, Urza establishing security protocols, Irene developing specialized magical containment measures, and Naruto providing critical intelligence regarding both expected arrivals and potential hostile elements. Throughout these interactions, Urza found herself studying both Naruto and Irene with growing analytical interest. Despite fundamental differences in background, magical approach, and personality, they demonstrated unexpected compatibility in both tactical planning and theoretical development. Their complementary perspectives created comprehensive response measures neither could have developed independently. More personally disturbing was Urza's gradual recognition that Irene demonstrated genuine respect toward Naruto rather than her typical condescension. The Dragon Queen, notorious for dismissing even accomplished wizards as fundamentally inferior, actually considered his perspectives with serious attention, occasionally modifying her own approaches based on his observations. This unprecedented receptivity suggested something Urza had never witnessed regarding her mother, genuine connection rather than tactical alliance or manipulative exploitation. Whether resulting from their shared transformation experiences or some deeper compatibility remained unclear, but its existence contradicted Urza's fundamental assumptions about Irene's capacity for authentic relationship. "You should rest," Irene observed, interrupting Urza's contemplation as final preparations concluded. "Tomorrow's transit attempt will require optimal cognitive function and magical reserves. Extended consciousness serves no practical purpose when all necessary arrangements have been implemented." The suggestion, delivered with clinical detachment rather than maternal concern, nevertheless represented uncheractery. stick consideration from the typically demanding Dragon Queen. Urza found herself momentarily unsure how to respond to this unexpected demonstration of reasonable care. Standard watch rotation continues regardless of personal rest periods. She replied automatically, falling back on professional protocols when emotional complexity threatened comfortable distance. I've got this covered, Naruto interjected with casual confidence. Dragon senses make me pretty effective at perimeter monitoring, and I need less sleep since the transformation anyway. You've been going non-stop since arriving this morning. Finding herself outnumbered by surprisingly reasonable arguments, Urza reluctantly acknowledged practical wisdom in measured rest before anticipated high-intensity operations. Very well, I'll conduct final security verification at dawn before transit preparations commence. As she departed toward her assigned quarters, Urza found herself glancing back at the unlikely pair silhouette. Ed against the command center's magical lighting, Irene's regal posture contrasting with Naruto's more casual stance, yet something in their interaction suggesting fundamental understanding despite outward differences. The observation added unwelcome complexity to her already conflicted feelings regarding both her mother and the interdimensional visitor whose arrival had catalyzed unprecedented cooperation. Professional assessment acknowledged their effective contribution to current security response, yet emotional caution maintained necessary distance from potential manipulation or disappointment. Tomorrow would bring additional complications, dimensional travelers from Naruto's world arriving amid potential hostile incursion attempts from Otsutsuki forces. Navigating these unprecedented circumstances would require optimal performance regardless of personal considerations. Yet as she prepared for brief rest period, Urza found herself contemplating Naruto's earlier words regarding forgiveness and future possibilities. Perhaps some conflicts remained unresolvable through conventional reconciliation, but tactical cooperation might create space for reassessment beyond historical grievances. The Queen's gambit continued evolving, sacrificing comfortable certainty regarding allies and adversaries to gain strategic advantage against emerging threats. Whether this improvised alliance would prove temporarily effective or establish foundation for more significant understanding remained uncertain as dimensional boundaries continued thinning between worlds both physical and personal. Dawn broke with golden brilliance across the research facility's eastern grounds, illuminating extensive preparations established during night hours. Council containment teams had constructed specialized magical barriers surrounding the designated transit zone, concentric circles of lacrima-embedded stones creating layered protection against both uncontrolled energy discharge and potential hostile interference. At the formation's center stood a raised platform inscribed with complex arcane symbols developed through combined research efforts. Irene's enchantment expertise provided fundamental structure, while Naruto's knowledge of chakra systems created necessary compatibility with the incoming traveler's energy signatures. Council resources supplied implementation infrastructure, converting theoretical designs into functional magical apparatus. Urza surveyed final preparations from elevated observation position, professional assessment noting both strengths and potential vulnerabilities in their hasty arrangements. The containment field appeared robust against anticipated energy fluctuations, though untested against deliberate interference from intelligent hostiles. Perimeter security confirmed at all stations, reported the senior Rune Knight commander, approaching with crisp military precision. Magical suppression fields active at identified dimensional weakness points within 5-kilometer radius. Maintain maximum alert status throughout the operation, Urza instructed. We've confirmed coordinated hostile interest in dimensional transition events. Any anomalous energy signatures should trigger immediate containment protocols. The commander acknowledged with professional efficiency before returning to his position, leaving Urza to continue final assessment. Below, Council technicians made calibration adjustments to monitoring equipment while Irene supervised arcane symbol alignment with characteristic perfectionism. Naruto approached from western perimeter, his movement displaying the unconscious grace she had noted during yesterday's combat encounter. Though maintaining human appearance, subtle indicators revealed his transformed nature, occasional golden highlights shimmering through blonde hair when sunlight struck particular angles, and momentary vertical pupil configuration when his focus intensified. No sign of hostile activity within sensory range, he reported, joining her at the observation position. Though the dimensional barrier feels thinner this morning, like atmospheric pressure dropping before a storm. Consistent with monitoring data, Urza confirmed. Ethernano fluctuation patterns suggest increased permeability between dimensional boundaries throughout the region. The Council has detected similar conditions at all previously identified anomaly sites. They're watching, Naruto stated with certainty. The Otsutsuki won't attempt direct interference yet, not until they've identified optimal approach vectors and analyzed our defensive capabilities more thoroughly. But they're definitely observing from their side of the dimensional barrier. The assessment aligned with Urza's tactical intuition despite lacking concrete evidence, an uncomfortable situation for someone who preferred definitive intelligence before committing resources. Professional training suggested conservative response under uncertainty. Why? Practical experience recognized preparation value even against unconfirmed threats. Transit preparations near completion, she noted, changing focus to immediate operational concerns. Irene St. Mate's optimal dimensional resonance conditions will occur approximately 30 minutes from now, coinciding with particular Ethernano-tied configurations. That matches what I'm sensing from my side, Naruto agreed. Expression growing more focused. The connection feels stronger this morning, like a path gradually becoming visible through fog. They're definitely getting close to establishing stable transit coordinates. His confidence regarding imminent arrival contradicted standard dimensional transit research, which suggested precise coordinates required months of calibration rather than days of improvised effort. Yet Urza had witnessed sufficient evidence of Naruto's sensory capabilities to take his assessment seriously despite its deviation from established theory. We should join final preparation activities, she decided, moving toward the platform with professional focus. Your position during the transition attempt should optimize both reception capability and defensive response options. They descended from the observation position together, approaching the central platform where Irene directed final adjustments with imperious precision. Council technicians scurried to implement her instructions despite obvious discomfort with taking direction from someone officially classified as potential security threat. Dimensional frequency stabilizing within optimal parameters, Irene noted as they approached. Not looking up from her calibration activities. Ethernano conductivity exceeds standard measurement thresholds throughout the containment field. Conditions approaching ideal transit configuration. I'll take center position during the attempt, Naruto stated rather than asked, already moving toward the platform's focal point. My energy signature provides the strongest beacon for them to target. Quote, partial transformation recommended, Irene advised with clinical detachment. Draconic energy creates dimensional resonance that enhances targeting capability. Why while maintaining sufficient human configuration for precise control? Like yesterday's wing manifestation, Urza clarified, professional assessment evaluating potential energy discharge parameters from such transformation. Similar though more extensive, Irene confirmed, completing final adjustments to the arcane configuration. Approximately 60% transformation threshold maintains optimal balance between resonance strength and control precision. Naruto nodded understanding, moving to the platform's center with focused determination. Golden light shimmered across his form as transformation began, controlled and precise rather than explosive or chaotic. His body expanded slightly as musculature densified, skin acquiring subtle golden sheen as scales manifested along straight IC locations rather than covering his entire form. Magnificent wings erupted from his back, unfurling to full extension before settling into relaxed position. His facial features shifted partially to ward draconic configuration, eyes transforming completely to vertical pupilled gold, jawline acquiring subtle scale patterns, and sensory appendages emerging along his cheeks and forehead. Most dramatically, a partial tail manifested, shorter than his full dragon form's appendage but substantial enough to require balance adjustment as it materialized. Transformation stable at approximately 58% integration. Irene assessed with clinical precision. Dimensional resonance established within optimal parameters. Ethernano conductivity responding appropriately to chakra integration patterns. The transformation's controlled precision impressed Urza despite her professional detachment. Unlike typical magical shape-shifting that merely overlaid different appearance, Naruto's change represented fundamental physiological reconfiguration while maintaining conscious identity and purpose. Even among dragon slayers, such integration between human and draconic aspects remained unprecedented in her experience. I can feel them, Naruto reported, golden eyes focusing on something beyond physical perception. The dimensional connection is strengthening, like a bridge gradually solidifying between worlds. Hinata's Byakugan is actively tracking our position now. Confirmed energy spike detected, called a council technician from monitoring position. Dimensional frequency oscillations increasing at exponential rate. Pattern consistent with external transit attempt rather than boundary degradation. Urza moved to secondary defense position, reequipping into Heaven's Wheel armor as precautionary measure. While hostile action seemed unlikely during initial transit, professional training demanded preparation for unexpected contingencies during unprecedented operations. Parry, meter containment fields at maximum capacity, reported the Rune Knight commander, his forces establishing strategic positions around the transit zone. Suppression measures prepared for immediate deployment if energy discharge exceeds safety thresholds. The atmosphere surrounding the platform changed perceptibly as transition preparations reached critical phase, air pressure fluctuating in rhythm. Mic pulses while ether nano concentrations swirled invisible patterns around Naruto's transformed figure. Golden energy radiated from his form, creating harmonic resonance with the arcane symbols inscribed across the platform's surface. Transit initiation imminent, Irene announced, crimson energy flowing from her hands into the stabilization array surrounding the platform. Dimensional frequency, approaching critical resonance threshold, prepare for potential displacement shockwave upon boundary penetration. Naruto extended his wings fully, golden energy intensifying around his transformed body as he established maximum resonance output. His expression reflected complete focus. Not anxiety or uncertainty but absolute concentration on facilitating safe passage for those attempting dimensional transition. The air above the platform shimmered, reality distorting as invisible pressure built against dimensional boundaries. Unlike the jagged tear they had encountered during the forest breach, this distortion formed with geometric precision, a perfect circle approximately 3 meters in diameter, edges shimmering with controlled energy that suggested deliberate formation rather than chaotic rupture. Dimensional window established, Irene reported, her typically clinical tone containing unusual notes of genuine interest. Structural integrity maintaining within acceptable parameters. Ethernano chakra conversion field functioning at 93% efficiency. Within the circular distortion, swirling energy gradually coalesced into recognizable patterns, suggestions of Shaw. Phase and movement becoming increasingly defined as connection strengthened between dimensions. Colors shifted from indistinct grays toward actual visualization, though still obscured by transitional interference. They're coming through, Naruto stated with absolute certainty, golden energy intensifying around his form as he established maximum resonance output. I can feel Hinata's chakra signature. They've locked onto my position and established transit vector. The dimensional window flashed blindingly. Energy discharge momentarily overwhelming containment parameters as something pushed through from the other side. Council technicians scrambled to adjust stabilization fields, compensating for unexpected power surge that threatened to collapse the carefully established transit corridor. Maintain positional integrity, Irene commanded, crimson energy flowing from her hands in precise configurations that reinforced critical junction points within the dimensional window. The Connectio N requires additional stabilization during actual transit phase. When the energy flash subsided, 3 figures stood upon the platform beside Naruto, 2 women and 1 man, their appearances disoriented but intact despite interdimensional transit stress. The dimensional window remained open behind them, energy patterns suggesting additional travelers might follow if connection maintained stability. The first woman immediately captured attention. Long indigo hair framing delicate features dominated by extraordinary eyes, pearlescent white with no visible pupils, veins prominently visible around their perimeter. Her posture suggested both combat readiness and physical exhaustion, the dimensional transit having clearly demanded significant personal resources. Beside her stood a taller woman, with auburn hair arranged in elegant updo that contradicted her obvious combat readiness. Her attire suggested official authority, formal robes bearing unfamiliar insignia worn over what appeared to be light armor. Most distinctive was her carriage, absolute confidence without arrogance, the unconscious bearing of someone accustomed to command authority. The male figure completed their group, tall, lean with sharp features partially obscured by a surgical mask, his silver hair defying gravity in spiky arrangement that seemed improbable without magical assistance. One eye remained covered by his headband, while the visible eye surveyed surroundings with analytical precision that missed nothing despite his apparently casual posture. "Naruto," breathed the indigo-haired woman, pearl-eyes W.I. denning as she took in his transformed appearance. Despite obvious surprise at his partially draconic form, her expression contained no fear or rejection, only profound relief and something deeper. Urza immediately recognized as genuine devotion. "Hinata," Naruto responded, golden eyes softening dramatically as he moved toward her with unconscious grace despite his transformed physiology. "You actually did it. You crossed dimensions." "We all did," corrected the auburn-haired woman, her voice carrying authority despite obvious fatigue from the transition. "Though I must say, your new appearance is quite striking, Naruto." The reports didn't fully capture the draconic aspects. "Mei Terumi," Naruto identified with genuine pleasure, then nodded toward the masked man. "And Kakashi-sensei, I should have known you'd be part of this rescue mission." Someone needed to maintain reasonable perspective amid all this dimensional enthusiasm, the silver-haired man replied with dry humor, visib. Eye crinkling to suggest hidden smile beneath his mask. "Though I must admit, your transformed state exceeds even my generous expectations for dramatic developments." Despite their casual conversation, Urza noted all three newcomers maintained subtle combat readiness, weight distribution suggesting immediate action capability despite apparent relaxation. Whatever their relationship with Naruto, these were clearly experienced warriors rather than civilian associates. "Fascinating energy configurations," Irene observed, studying the newcomers with analytical precision. "Pure chakra systems it out ethernano integration, fundamentally different from standard magical physiology yet demonstrating comparable functional parameters." The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.